Oh. Sorry.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to hand you over to the Mayor of the City of Vincent.
Hello, everyone. Apologies. It is Christmas time and there's so many Christmas events happening in the community. So I've just come from the Kyalla Christmas market. So apologies for being a little bit late. I'll just not quite sure where you got to there. You did nothing. Okay. All right. So good evening. Welcome to our final council meeting for 2022. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on Whadjuk Noongar land and pay respects to elders past and present. And welcome you all to the meeting. Welcome members of the public gallery. Welcome councillors and welcome staff and welcome our auditors this evening. Good to see you here. We will go straight to public question time. Oh, sorry. First of all, we have no apologies this evening. We are all here. So we'll go straight to public question time and receiving of public statements. If for those who may not have been here, most of you look very familiar. If you do wish to speak, we just ask that you state your name, the suburb in which you live, and the item that you're talking to. And if you're not sure what item it is, don't worry, we can help you with that. So first speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor Cole, councillors. It's Peter Merger here from Urbanista Town Planning at 231 Buller Street in Perth. I'm here to respectfully ask you to support the proposed 6-unit development at 107 to 109 Summer Street when reconsidering the application this evening. When the application was presented to council for determination in September, excuse me, it was refused due to variations to street setbacks, outdoor living areas, landscaping and visitor parking. Whilst the decision was disappointing at the time, I acknowledge that some of the concerns raised by councillors were valid. On that basis, the decision was made to appeal the refusal in the tribunal and to come back to council through the mediation process with a proposal that was improved. This has been achieved in the following ways. On the ground floor, the street setback to Unit 1 is increased to 5.3 metres from 4.23. It now complies with the city's front setback requirements. This change also means that the courtyard to Unit 1 will be larger and be able to contain more landscaping. In relation to the outdoor living areas, the balconies have been increased in size and are now compliant. The provision of landscaping in the front setback area was previously under 50%, and now that has been amended to provide more than 50%, which brings it into compliance as well. So too do the dimensions for the planting of the trees, with the development providing 2x2 metre areas for the planting of trees, which brings that into compliance as well. With respect to the design of the building, it's undergone several amendments to its front facade, most notably by changing the material on the lift shaft wall. This change and others have resulted in the development being awarded a score of 10 out of 10 by the city's DRP. In relation to car parking, the development only provides one visitor bay, and I know that still may be an issue. However, I believe that the development satisfies the design principles for visitor parking, with more than 140 car bays available on the street to satisfy any demand. Additionally, the site is located within walking distance of 2 train stations, and the proposal sees the removal of a 3.5 metre wide redundant crossover to the western boundary, which would reduce the vehicle access points on the road and provide improve the look of the streetscape. The width of that crossover would allow the city to reclaim some space for motorcycle parking, and should council be amenable to the idea. With respect to the visitor parking as well, we did toss up whether we provided more hardstand or landscaping. What we thought we ended up with is improved landscaping outcome, less hardstand and visitor parking, which I think can be provided for on the street and with alternate means of transport. So thank you for your time. I hope that you set aside your previous decision, acknowledge the improvements and approve the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Next speaker, please. Dudley, we have received written statements from you as well this evening, so I assume you're not going to repeat those because they can be taken as read.
There were questions for. one more
Okay.
time. Yep. Dudley Meyer Highgate, the first item is 13.2. I think it's 13.2, the service station notice of motion. I just want to remind council that on the 16th of November last year, you approved alterations and additions to a service station at 17 Brisbane Street. It was in a mixed use zone and would be classed as an X use under tonight's proposal. It was also very similar to the recent Ango Street proposal, service station and a distillery shop. The arguments produced by that community at the time were very similar to the current ones produced by the North Perth community. Yet at that time you dismissed the community. So I think you should, ask yourselves, why did we approve it then, yet now consider such a development is not permissible at all? Why discretion was allowed then, but not now? The second item is 12.6, the annual report and financials. So one thing I find interesting and insightful each year is to compare the information that's provided to council at budget time with the final audited figures. Basically tells you how well informed council were when they set the budget, and similarly how on top of the financials its staff are. It has real impact on the budget, on the rates that are charged to the community. The analysis, when it doesn't take very long, was scary. Operating expenditure was overstated by $1.5 million at budget time. Also, employee costs were understated by $350,000. That's $350,000 they spent more than they told you at the end of the financial year. I can't fathom how you can get that wrong. Anyway, in summary, the staff got it wrong by just over $1 million, which would have been $1 million less rates if all other things had remained the same. And that $1 million has impact on future years because that's the base for next year. The other item that concerns me in 12.6 is that the fact that the Auditor General's letters concerning financial audit information systems and the exit brief have been made confidential. Clearly something is wrong and something is seriously wrong. And I appreciate the argument that you can't expose the city to bad actors by releasing some information, but I think that's a fairly weak excuse. If a flaw has been identified, steps should be taken immediately, and I mean immediately, to rectify those flaws so that bad actors can't exploit those flaws. It may mean turning off certain facilities for a short period of time, but you fix it straight away. And the fact that this isn't the first time this happened is a real worry. It raises questions about holding people to account. The proper thing would be to release the letters and provide a reassurance that the flaws had already been plugged. Bad actors now think, oh, well, we don't know what it is, but there's something wrong with Vincent. In places I worked for in the past, such issues would have been treated extremely seriously to the extent that people's jobs would have been on the line. So I just ask that councillors bear that in mind when they consider the CEO's contract renewal. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas. Merry festive season.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Dave Raby, never been to a council meeting.
Welcome to your first council meeting.
Yeah, thank you. 6 Burgess Street, Leederville. I want to talk about 10.3, and I understand it was brought by a 12-year-old girl. So I'll hand over to my daughter of why we're here.
Hi, my name is Piper Raby. I want the bylaw for chickens to pass because I want to be able to raise those chickens from chicks and to be able to have that responsibility to use when I get older and when I mature. I would also like to be able to have eggs from those chickens and to be able to collect them every day after school and to be able to cook with them because I really like cooking and to eat them.
So we would like some chickens and to be allowed to get some chickens because we're not allowed to at the moment in time. And I think it fits the City of Vincent's overarching policies that we want to be vibrant, inclusive, green. And I think it's perfect. And I think we should just allow us to have chickens, guys.
Thank you so much. I can just say this is wonderful because this came in with a little girl called Sasha, who I think was probably only about 8 or 9 at the time. And to have you here, Piper, on the night that we are looking to adopt the animal local law and to allow chickens in what has been a prohibited area is wonderful. Congratulations on coming to your first council meeting. You spoke extremely well. And what year are you in at Bob Hawke? Year 7. Fantastic work. You're very welcome anytime you wish to come and talk to us about issues, because we don't often get young people in the chamber speaking to us, and it's wonderful to hear from you. Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Yes, please come forward.
Hi, I'm Leslie from Mount Hawthorn. Got a question about the drainage in the area of Menzies Park, East Street, Linton, Sass. And I see one of the items on the agenda is drainage. I need to know a couple of things. How old is the stormwater drains in the area? How big is the diameter of the stormwater drains, especially the ones from Sass Ave to Linton Street? What is the condition of these stormwater drains? What's the service life of these stormwater drains? And are they below the water table? That's all that I would like answered.
Thank you, Leslie. I can't answer those technical questions. We will see whether our engineering team can answer some of them. But I think the purpose of the item on the agenda tonight is to really make sure that we are ready for climate change and increased flooding, and to actually have a really good look at all of our infrastructure. And the purpose of it is to be extremely thorough and to do a full assessment of how our drainage is tracking now and whether it's equipped for the future. So I'll just hand over to our Director of Infrastructure and Environment and ask whether you have any of those technical details to hand, or whether you'd like to respond to Leslie outside of tonight's council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Do not have the technical answers to my hand at the moment. The purpose of the report tonight, though, is for us in the engineering team to be able to continue the data uptake in respect to all of that information, in respect to the location of our current drainage, the size and nature of the drainage infrastructure that's there, including depth, the diameter of the pipes, their current condition and service life. So that's the purpose of the report, is for us to continue obtaining that knowledge and information about our drainage system. And from that, then we'll be able to better understand how it works, and also be able to plan replacement when time comes. So happy to give some information direct in respect to the diameters of the pipes around Safford Avenue and Linton Street, if we have it to hand as well.
Thank you, Leslie. If you could perhaps leave your details with us, Leslie, we can come back to you. But just to be very clear that this spot in Mount Hawthorn is our probably #1 priority at the moment in terms of drainage in the City of Vincent. And this has prompted us to do this very thorough assessment work that we are now planning to do. So we'll get those details to you if you'd like to leave your email and phone number. Thank you. You can, whoever's easy, if you'd like to, my email address is on the website. You can send it through to me and I'll send it on to Peter. Or you can write it down on your details down on a piece of paper and I'll hand those over. Or Peter's, our engineer is Luke McGurk. He's up the back there. Are there any further comments? No, I think everyone in the chamber has spoken. Thank you very much for your comments this evening. Thank you again, Piper, for coming in. And just to also note that we have received some written statements from Sam Fitzpatrick of Perth commenting on item 6.3 in relation to the animal local law. Philip and Ratha McVeigh of Mount Hawthorn commenting in relation to the skate park. And Dudley Meyer also submitted 4 further questions in writing in relation to item 10 and others. Oh, I'm missing my iPad. No, I don't want your iPad, it's okay. That's fine. Okay, so we will go to applications for leave of absence, and I have requested a leave of absence for a period of 5 days in January, from the 16th of January to the 20th of January. Could I please have a mover and seconder to approve the leave? Moved by councillor Wallace, seconded by councillor Loden. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Is there anyone else seeking leave over this period? It is really a sort of a recess, but I think as mayor, I just thought I'd better put that on the record. Okay, so then we'll move on to the receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. We have none this evening. So item 6 is the confirmation of minutes, and this is for the council meeting held on the 15th of November 2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes? Moved by councillor Hallett, seconded by councillor Castle. All those in favour? I declare the minutes carried. Announcements. Yes, I have some announcements to make. Just to say that it has been a bit of a whirlwind of community events, having just whirled my way in here. And we've been celebrating across the community with carols in our parks, with markets, with school awards ceremonies, end of year gatherings, street parties, Christmas events for our seniors, and a really fantastic event with our volunteers last Thursday night. And it's been really wonderful to celebrate together. Just some highlights from the year. It's always nice to reflect at this time. Really pleased to see on our agenda tonight the once in a lifetime opportunity to underground power across the city of Vincent. All of our residential streets and town centres should be covered if we endorse the MOU position before us this evening, which is extremely exciting and will have big impacts not only on our energy reliability and on our tree canopy, but result in all new light poles and LED lighting across our suburbs. And something I hear a lot about is our dark suburbs at night time. So this will be really transformational for the city of Vincent in a number of ways. It was a real pleasure this year to host the Waffle Grand Final at Leederville Oval and to see Leederville Oval full to capacity, something that we haven't seen in some time, and to have thousands of people coming through the family-friendly carnival that was Footyville in the streets of Leederville. Also to launch our smoke-free town centres 3 years ahead of schedule in November. That was something that's that we're just embedding now, with lots of education happening in our town centres, people in green T-shirts and lots of signage around to educate people about that change. We've been doing a lot of work in our playgrounds. We've had makeovers at Gladstone Street Reserve and Les Lillyman most recently. We've upgraded the Menzies Pavilion and the Hyde Park West toilets and the Hyde Park. No, that was the previous financial year, just West this year. Yes, the other one's the last financial year. Okay. Also, we're moving on to the Sydney and Hayes Street development, which is really important about returning that land back to public open space for the North Perth community, which is very exciting. We've lit up a lot of our reserves this year, Britannia Reserve, Charles Villiard Reserve. It allows our sporting clubs to train for longer, but it also for our community to walk their dogs and exercise and spend more time at the park into the evenings. We celebrated our first year of FOGO with a contamination rate below 3% and were recognised by a 2022 National Award for Local Government for our position on waste and all of the different changes that we've made to achieve our zero waste to landfill by 2028 goal. We have, for the first time, have a reconciliation action plan that we have worked with together with our Vincent Broodiers Aboriginal Elders Group, and they have endorsed and supported us with that plan, which has been a really great step forward on our reconciliation journey. And in 2023, we're excited to be moving ahead with the litters change rooms and upgrade to the litters club rooms, a youthscape space in Mount Hawthorn, subject to your approval tonight, and upgrades for Banks Reserve, including a riverside interpretation node and a lovely new bridge crossing the Walters Brook crossing. So there's lots going on, but those were just some of the things that I think were worth celebrating. I'd also just like to say, as I said on Thursday night, a ginormous thank you to our Vincent volunteers who produce so much hard work throughout the year. Just been, as I mentioned, at Kyella Markets, which is run by the school community at Kyella, and there are hundreds of people down there. It's a raging success. It's been going for 7 years now. This is just one example of the incredible work that our volunteers do out in our community. So for all of those, from our P&Cs to sporting clubs to the many diverse clubs and community groups, we're extremely proud of the work that you do, and we say thank you. I just also wanted to say thank you to the council members. Thanks for all the late nights and for all the effort that you put in throughout the year. Hopefully not midnight tonight, but certainly we have had some late ones. And I just also want to say thank you to the CEO and staff for all of your work throughout the year. It's very much appreciated, particularly those who have to come and sit here on Tuesday nights with us. And I did want to acknowledge that we do have someone leaving us who's been quite instrumental in some of our key projects at the City of Vincent, and that is Mark Fellows. I read about this on LinkedIn, that Mark is leaving the City of Vincent in January. So I wanted to mention Mark because he is the manager of built environment and wellbeing and has been instrumental in a number of our key projects. Not just this year, but through COVID, I think we really saw Mark shine. And when Councillor Castle, Councillor Gontaszewski and myself had weekly meetings during COVID, it was Mark Fellows that was really leading the charge in our COVID response and doing an amazing job of that. And I think that we just felt that the city was in good hands under Mark's leadership in that space. Also, he's been really involved in the small business friendly approvals program, because he likes to see regulation be helpful and not hinder. And I think that's been one of his key mantras through his time in Vincent. He's also been really instrumental in achieving our smoke-free town centres, not just in achieving it for Vincent, but in forming really strong partnerships with all of the public health organisations that have strongly backed us in on that. And I think that is really a great testament to the health team that they reach out and network and form that support. Also involved in our smoke-free in our restricted premises policy that we're also looking at this evening. There are just a few things. And there's also an inaugural public health plan in there too. So Mark, I just wanted to recognise your tremendous achievements at the City of Vincent and say thank you so much from all of us and wish you all the best in your new endeavours. Oh, and also 4 years on the animal local law, which we're delivering for Piper. How soon can you have chickens once we approve this animal local law? Not for Christmas? I don't know. I don't think we'll be policing it too closely. Okay, well, thank you, Mark. We really have enjoyed working with you. Okay, so declarations of interest, CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I might just ask the acting executive director just to explain the process we've gone through with the department regarding the 4 proximity interests in relation to the underground power item. And we've got advice back from the department today.
Thank you, CEO. Through the Mayor. As council members will be aware, 4 council members have declared a proximity interest in respect to the Vincent Underground Power Project and the 5 new additional project areas. As a consequence of them, their properties being within those project zones and their likelihood of benefiting from underground power. The city applied to the Department of Local Government to gain a ministerial exemption, for those members to be able to participate under the Act. Today, we received a response from the Department of Local Government advising the following, that they refer to our correspondence advice that in accordance with the authority delegated by the Minister for Local Government, I have determined that an approval is not necessary under Section 569, subsection 3 of the Local Government Act 1995. After considering the available information, it appears that only 4 of the city's councillors have made a declaration in relation to this matter. As such, the city would still have sufficient quorum to determine the matter, even if all of these councillors elected not to participate. I've also noted the proposed expansion of the city's underground power project will impact approximately 55% of the district's ratepayers. The number of impacted ratepayers increased to almost 100% if one considers the existing areas of the project already approved. Accordingly, I formed the view that the interests which the councillors are seeking to disclose are ones which they hold in common with a significant number of the city's ratepayers. This means they are exempt from disclosure and do not require participation from approval. Trust the above outcome is satisfactory to the council.
Through Mayor Cole, the other declarations of interest are from Councillor Loden, impartiality interest in relation to item 10.3 on the animal local law. The extent of the interest being that Councillor Loden knows a number of people who have chickens, including his neighbour. Councillor Warner declared a financial interest in relation to item 11.2, which is the authorisation of expenditure monthly report, noting that she is a director of Upbeat Events, who were the event managers for the City of Vincent for the grand final street activation. She's not seeking approval to participate in the debate nor vote in the matter. Councillor Warner also declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 10.1 on stormwater drainage, noting that the extent of the interest is that Councillor Warner's house is in close proximity to one of the hotspots. Councillor Wallace declared an impartiality interest on the same item, stormwater drainage, noting that the extent of the interest is that the City of Vincent administration have engaged GHD consultants to assist with the detailed technical hydraulic briefs and with interim drainage design. Councillor Wallace is just noting that he was formerly a long-term employee of GHD. And Mayor Cole, I have a financial interest in relation to 7.1 relating to my contract. That's all the declarations received.
Are there any further declarations of interest? Councillor Opler, you've received some advice. Do you wish to make a declaration of interest?
Just the, you asked in a meeting last week and we put some advice into the briefing notes in relation to Leederville Oval, the administration building and your property across the road, including we had a discussion about potential or perceived conflicts of interest on the Leederville Oval master plan.
All right, I read through the briefing notes and I didn't see anything conclusive. If I missed something, do you want to just, can I ask a question as to what it is that you're relating to?
Only whether or not you did want to declare an interest in relation to the Leederville Oval master plan.
I don't believe I have. I was waiting for confirmation from the Department of Local Government. I understand that hasn't been received. I've considered the matter. I don't believe there is any. I've spoken to, I think administration can see there's no proximity interest. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was more about a financial interest. And I've spoken to property developers about the hypothetical about whether Leederville Oval development, in whatever form that takes, without because there's nothing actually tabled, whatever form that takes, how would that adversely or bestow on me some benefit? And they said, unless it was an overshadowing issue, that there was high-rise buildings set for Vincent Street North, that could be an overshadowing or privacy issue. They couldn't see any reason why there would be a financial interest to declare. And given that I'm so far back off Vincent Street and I'm not directly opposite Leederville Oval, and that none of that type of development is proposed or contemplated by the prior master plan that I can see, I just don't, in my heart of hearts, I actually don't believe there is one. So, but I have put an application into administration for reimbursement of legal fees to get a legal opinion on it to be absolutely sure, even though I don't believe there is one and I'm waiting for the response on that.
Councillors, just if you're wondering, in the briefing notes 7.2, there was a very lengthy explanation around the financial and proximity interest matter. That's what the CEO is referring to.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add, we did receive advice from the Department of Local Government late today. The request through the Department of Local Government was for the City and Councillor Opler to meet with the department to gain some advice around Councillor Opler's specific circumstances. The Department of Local Government advised that they're not prepared to meet and provide advice on individual circumstances, and advise that Councillor Opler either seek legal advice or whether the city requires clarification that the city seeks legal advice. In the meantime, I have sought advice from the West Australian Local Government Association to gain an industry perspective in respect to councillor Apollo's circumstance, but that perspective hasn't been forthcoming as yet.
Well, look, the obligation is on the council member to declare, and there not being a declaration, then we will just need to proceed. Okay. There being no further declarations of interest, we shall move on to calling out items for discussion. In addition to those that have already been called out, we have had item 9.1 mentioned today, item 13.2, 11.6, 10.3 and 10.1. Councillor Hallett, do you wish to raise any further items this evening?
Just 9.5.
Councillor Castle,
9.8.
Councillor Wallace,
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Iapolo,
Could you just repeat that and preferably in the order so I can tick them off?
9.1,
Yes.
13.2. Is this just a ticking off exercise? Because we can do that when we come, the
Yep.
CEO reads them off for everybody. So, but do you have any
Oh,
in
you've got
addition?
several. Yeah, you just want me to read them all out or just one?
9.1, 13.2,
no.
11.6.
I said I've got several that I'd like to address. They haven't been called out yet. Do you want me to say all of them or just one at a time?
One at a time, please.
Okay. So 9.3,
Yep,
9.4, 9.9, 12.2, 12.6. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Warner, Councillor Loden,
Just a clarification, I thought it was 9.2 that was the speaker in the gallery rather than 9.1. Or I believe he was
9.1 Summers Street was called out, was spoken to.
I think maybe I've got it in the wrong order in my briefing. Is that what's
Yeah,
happening?
the order got swapped between individual reports and the actual agenda.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks.
Summer Street is 9.1. Yep. Councillor Gonchevsky. Okay.
Excuse me, Mayor. Do I have to also put the leader level one or is that automatically
The
included?
noms we will talk to.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just confirm whether council members wish to discuss item 17.1? CEO contract?
Yes, we want to discuss that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll read out the item numbers that are being proposed to be moved en bloc, which include items 9.2, 9.6, 9.7, 10.4, 11.1, 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, 12.1, 12.3, 12.4, 12.5.
Can I please have a mover and seconder for the en bloc items? Moved by councillor Wallace, seconded by councillor Loden. All those in favour? Declare the en bloc items carried. Okay, Peter Mudgett, I'm so sorry, but I've been asked to go to the Auditor General first because we've got a consultant here. Oh, sorry, not a consultant. My sincere apologies, Mark. We don't have a consultant here. We have Mark Ambrose, the Senior Director of the Office of Auditor General. So we'll come to you next after that, Peter. So apologies for that. So that is item 11.6, which is our draft annual report for 2021-2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? It's going to be a long night. Moved by councillor Wallace, seconded by councillor Loden.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have much to say to it, just tabling it to get it on the table.
Apologies, we will also have to deal with 12.6, but then we will come to you. Yep, no problem. Okay, councillor Loden.
I'm also happy for it to be tabled.
Now that it's been moved and seconded, I might just go to Mark. So Mark, did you wish to make any comments in relation to your findings?
Thank you, Mayor Cole. The audit opinion for 21-22 is an unqualified audit opinion. There is a change due to the regulations. We no longer rely on the non-compliance with Part 6 of the Act, and we no longer report on adverse trends in ratios. The city overall has improved on the monthly and daily controls. There are the key areas for improvements, as noted in the management letter, are on the frequency of valuations and on information systems. We've raised some key findings on the database security and access controls. And I think those are the key areas that we noted for improvement. Thanks.
Thank you. I will ask a question just in relation to that. Might not be a question for you, Mark, it might be more of a governance question, but it was about the confidentiality of the attachments in relation to some of the ICT findings. Would anyone like to comment on that? It was a question asked from the public gallery this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. I can probably touch on it, albeit I'm not the executive manager, information and communication technology systems. A number of items came up in respect to the information system audit. There are some complex issues that need to be dealt with. They're not issues that can be dealt with overnight, nor are they issues where one can switch off the system and not deal with it. The system needs to be managed over a period of time. So it's not appropriate for some of those findings to be public because they present a risk to the city in respect to the systems being compromised.
Councillors, any questions for Mark from the Office of Auditor General or for Reece? No, okay. Are you happy to move the receiving of the annual report? As it has been moved, so I'll take it to the vote then. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate you being in here. And we are now going to deal with our audit committee. Which is the finance, yes. So that is item 12.6, report and minutes of the audit committee meeting held on the 7th of December 2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by councillor Warner, seconded by councillor Iapolo.
Just a clarification, doesn't it have to be moved by the deputy member of the audit committee?
Does it have to be moved? I know that we have to deal with the item, but I'm not sure whether it's technically that it has to be moved by the deputy chair.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just a customary process. It's not within the standing orders.
A customary process. So it was it's okay. We can get back onto that custom next time if it pleases the council. So council want to know questions or comments? Councillor Iapolo, you did wish to discuss this item?
Just one question, which actually probably reflects the one from the gallery. The 3 items marked confidential, are they ordinarily marked as so? These relate to the OAG audit findings, and unless there is a particular item that highlights weaknesses that could be targeted by bad actors, wouldn't most of these reports be in the public interest from a transparency and good governance perspective? It would be best practice to make available to the public with appropriate redactions for those items that perhaps relate to security.
Through Mayor Cole, as part of this report, the findings will be attached to the city's audit log, which will be reviewed by the audit committee and presented to council on a regular basis. And that's where we would split the findings up into those which we considered confidential for the confidential audit log and those which are non-confidential, which can go onto the public version. So council will see that at the next iteration of the audit log.
So just to clarify, parts of that OAG report which aren't considered sensitive or will go to the public in some form down the track. Great, thank you.
Councillors, any further discussion or questions? Okay, I'll put the audit committee minutes. All those in favour? I declare those carried. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Okay, then moving then to item 9.1, which is the first item raised by a member of the public gallery this evening. And that is item, number 107 Summer Street, Perth, section 31, State Administrative Tribunal reconsideration for proposed 6 group dwellings. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I think that this is an improved development through the SAP mediation process, and whilst I'm sure you all know I'm not a fan of reduced visitor parking bays, I do appreciate that there was some tension that in this development, and I certainly believe that this is an approvable development, so I have no intention of voting against it. But I do think that we do need to be really careful when we scrutinise developments to make sure that we are not losing out on multiple fronts when we're talking about landscaping and car parking, etc. However, I believe that this is a development that if it went to a full hearing would absolutely be approved, and so I will support it this evening.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. I similarly was not supportive of this development last time round, but I do appreciate the efforts been made by the applicant in improving this. I do similarly share those concerns around landscaping and visitor parking as well, which was a significant driver for my concerns last time round. But I do agree that this is approvable, so I will support the officer recommendation.
Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Iapolo.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is an interesting one. So there were 7 planning elements that didn't satisfy deemed to comply provisions on the original application, which council denied. Landscaping now complies, so only 1 of the 7 have now satisfied the conditions. So the other 6 still do not. I recognise and acknowledge that good progress was made on street setback and the outdoor living, except for units 1 and 6. There's been no change to boundary walls or lot boundary setback. There's been no change to parking or site works or visual privacy issues. Where I'm curious about this, and there will be a question here for administration. It says in the briefing that the amended plans were not re-advertised because the changes were not significantly different to the original application. So this is where I'm stumbling, because I'm trying to understand why it is that this council refused the original application and the changes were so minor that it didn't deserve to be re-advertised to the public. That's where I'm struggling to understand why this is now an approvable application, and therefore one which would warrant us to vary our decision or set it aside.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the city's community and stakeholder engagement policy sets out circumstances when the city will advertise development proposals, and it also sets out criteria and circumstances when advertising would not be required. As part of that, some of those criteria where it wouldn't be re-advertised is where development amended plans or a revised development proposal would not result in new or greater departures to the deemed to comply. And also where it would not be significantly different in terms of its built form outcome. Now, in the administration's comments section, in its summary assessment, first dot point, it talks through that the fourth dot point, it really talks through that the overall built form and scale will remain the same. That has not changed significantly, and you've heard that through the gallery tonight. But there have been revisions specific to some of those reasons for refusal. It doesn't address all of those reasons for refusal. Administration has stepped through each of council's previous reasons for refusal, and the extent that the proposal has or hasn't addressed those. But on balance, some of those reasons for refusal have been addressed, and you need to consider the development in its totality in terms of not only the 7 that you referred to, Councillor Opolo, in terms of not being deemed to comply, but you're required to consider this proposal on its own merits in its entirety. The aspects of development that are, where discretion is being sought, as well as balance with all the remaining elements where deemed to comply has been satisfied.
I'm just struggling with this one. So I guess where I'll leave it is I'm interested to hear what other councillors say on this. I have a difficulty rescinding a decision that we made in majority without understanding really the reasons why it should be changed. And I guess it's really getting me is this comment that it didn't get re-advertised because it was materially the same. So anyone who can shed light on that and help me form an opinion, I'd appreciate it.
Through Mayor Cole, I just might add quickly, the process that's set out in the regulations for advertising development applications really allows local governments to advertise applications once. And so our policy has been set up with that in mind. Where a proposal is not, after an advertising has occurred, if a proposal has been changed and the application isn't a worse application, if you like, if it's not having a greater impact, then what the policy is saying is it won't be re-advertised again. We already have all the comments from the neighbours about the impact that the original proposal was having. All of those are taken into account. If the proposal's not adding to those, then we won't re-advertise it because there's a tension. We've got to maintain the process set out in the regulations, which allows 90 days for the application to be assessed, 1 advertising period, and we would really only advertise again if it was an additional impact that we had to have the community's feedback on. So I know it's difficult. You don't have the opportunity to advertise it a second time to see if everyone's happy with this one, but that's not the question you're being asked. You're being asked whether the design aligns with the objectives in the R codes.
One more question. It just says here, the reason why the amended proposal submitted was not re-advertised was because it would not result in a significantly different proposal to what was previously advertised, with the overall built form and design of the development remaining relatively unchanged. That's the bit I'm struggling with, that sentence. So if that was that a poorly worded thing, or is that the reason?
Yes, through Mayor Cole, I would say that's not a nuanced enough statement to explain the changes. It's really the standard wording we apply in every circumstance where we're explaining that it's not going to be re-advertised. So I agree, it's not worded as well as it could have been.
Councillors, any further comments on this development? I'll put it. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Opolo voting against. I declare that carried. That then takes us to item 10.3, the final adoption of the City of Vincent Animal Local Law 2021. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Warner.
Thank you, Mayor. I was a junior member of council when we first discussed this one, so this is very exciting to see this finally up. Appreciate administration making the changes to the law around setbacks from boundaries. I think that'll make it a lot easier for people that have chickens, including my neighbour. So that's really good to see. I think that'll actually make it a lot easier for people to do that, particularly people that are in inner city areas where those setbacks basically would have meant that although you are permitted to have a chicken, you are too close to any boundary to actually be able to have one. So I think that's really great addition. I also thanks for the feedback around cats that Councillor Wallace raised in the briefing last week. Very interesting and I guess disappointing that we can't prohibit them in all Vincent locations, but maybe that's something for the future. But overall, this has my support, so I'll let someone else speak. Thank you.
Councillor Warner, councillors. Just a comment that I know that living in the city of Vincent, where people do have a very sustainable ethos, and we've been really good on our native gardens and making sure that we've got good habitat. It's definitely goes hand in glove that people are very interested in having bees in their backyard, native bees needing support, and chickens, and have been people that have sort of probably secretly been harbouring a few chickens in their backyard, wondering whether there'll be an inspection coming their way. So I think it's wonderful for people to be able to have chickens, to share their eggs, and to enjoy the cooing sounds that my neighbour has chickens, and I love listening to them cooing and making noises across the fence. It's a nice, and a pigeon fancier as well. It's a very active laneway that I have, and I love it. It really just creates a lovely atmosphere. So for all those who've been waiting for this for 4 years, and to Saskia, our first young person that came in to ask for this 4 years ago, and to Piper, who's concluded this for us this evening, we say welcome to the chickens and goodbye to the prohibited chicken area zone. It's about time, and we're very, very excited to reach this point. So we'll let you know as soon as it's approved, but as I say, if some chickens appear over Christmas, I don't know that there'll be too much care about that. Anyway, I'm very happy to support this. Are there any further comments? Okay, I'll put the final adoption of the animal local law. All those in favour? And declare that carried unanimously. It's done. Thank you. So that takes us to item 10.1, which was raised by Leslie. Stormwater drainage. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Nicole. Really important piece of work. I think the last year or two has proven that we have, significantly undersized stormwater infrastructure in some key areas, which is resulting in some pretty awful impacts on some private lots. So yeah, very important piece of work. Look forward to the results of the study when it comes forward.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
I'm very supportive of this. I think if climate change isn't on your agenda as a council or any sort of decision-making body, then you are doing your community a disservice. So I think that this is important work, and I also think that it's important work to do, and understand it's also important that we have that forward plan and can fund it and can make room in our budgets for it. So I really appreciate this approach.
Councillors. Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive as well. I think it's great. It's a good piece of work. There's a lot of work being put into it, which is obvious. But I just had a question. It was regarding the drainage technical memorandum, which is marked as confidential. The question is whether you can answer it in open forum, but I don't understand why that attachment is regarded as confidential. That's the first question. And the second question is there anything that needs to be highlighted to council that I'm perhaps missing as to why that would be confidential and therefore might require serious and prompt attention by council?
Through the chair, yes. The essence of what was in that technical memorandum has been included in the report. However, the report does go on and talks about some preliminaries in respect to a procurement process that the city will need to undergo in respect to that project work, and that should not be released and needs to remain confidential.
That makes sense, and I agree with that. Is there any value, do you think, in redacting that portion and making that available, given the significant community interest that we've had in this subject, including obviously questions from the gallery?
through the chair, I'd need to look at the technical paper again. We'd need to get agreement with the GHD to be able to do that first of all, because they have made that paper limited in respect to our ability to reuse. And pending that, from memory, having a look through the paper, it would be probably very difficult to redact.
I'm fine with that explanation. Thanks, Peter.
Any further comments? I just want to say I am very happy to see this body of work happen. I think that when I think about climate risk in Vincent from an emergency management perspective, really for me, flooding and severe storms is probably the number one concern. So whilst that can also affect, storms can affect what happened above the ground, we have highlighted some issues in terms of our drainage network, and that's not just about the City of Vincent, it's also about the way we feed into the Water Corp system. And Leslie is living in a very number one hotspot, and definitely understand the fear that can bring. I was flooded in the 2011 infamous storm, so it's pretty scary to be in that situation, and it is definitely a key priority of the council to not only look at resolving these current issues we're having, but to make sure that we are equipped for the future when the 1 in 100 event becomes more like a 1 in 5 year or 1 in 12 month event. So appreciate you, manager, getting onto this and setting this up to happen. Any further comments or any questions? Okay, we'll move the motion. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So that wasn't moving, that was actually voting, but I think you knew what I was getting at. And Leslie, we'll keep in touch with you on those issues. You're very welcome to stay if you're enjoying the experience. Not many do, some find it semi-interesting. Okay. So that concludes items that were raised by members of the public gallery. So we'll then go next to items where we have consultants waiting, and the CEO has asked me to go to the new parking local law 2023, which is item 10.2, where we have Chris Dixon and Jade Holnick from Jackson McDonald's. So we'll go next to this item. So could I please ask for a mover and seconder for item 10.2? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Warner. Councillor Loden.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm happy to support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Warner, any comments or questions? Councillors, questions, comments? Well, there you go, Chris and Jade. That was a time well spent. We don't have any questions. I think you did very well last week, and we appreciated all of the clarifications that were provided through the briefing notes as well. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'll take a vote on the resolution, on the motion. All those in favour? I declare the local parking local law adopted. Okay. Next item where we have consultants is item 9.9, request for proposals for redevelopment of Leederville Car Park Stage 2. So I would like to welcome back to the meeting Just John and Ian, no probity advisor. Right. We have Ian Mickle, Head of Agency at Cygnet West, and John Del Dosso, Head of Valuation, Research and Advisory at Cygnet West, joining us this evening. Welcome to the meeting. So can I please have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation. In this case, I do note there is a number of proposed amendments here, so I'll let the proposed amender speak to those items further. Thank you.
Can we just take a moment to read these, because I don't know about everyone else, but the first I saw of them was when they were on the table this evening, so I haven't actually had a chance to read through them. Does anyone need a bit of time just to read and absorb the information?
Also, they've been changed. Some of them have been changed from what I actually submitted, and I I've been reading frantically. I know for sure, I'm not sure why it was changed, but the one in the,
Or perhaps we can read them first and then
Yeah.
get to that.
yeah, okay, sure.
Okay, look, council, can we just, we've got a mover and seconder. This has been a lot of information to get across at the last minute, but I think we'll just have to step through it as we come to each of them. So we do have a mover. Councillor Loden, you move this item and you're happy. Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak to it or ask questions?
I'll be brief and just say I support the item in its current form. I'm happy to consider the amendments if and when they're moved, but very happy to proceed to the next stage.
Thank you. Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Uplow, will go to your amendments if you'd like to propose your first amendment. Yes, you can.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so obviously the land transaction proposed under the Leederville expression of interest process for the land parcels at the Avenue and Frame Court is a material disposal of local government land, and quite possibly the largest dollar value transaction ever undertaken by the City of Vincent. There are two, I've only actually made one request in the course of this whole thing, and that was for a commercial review. I just want to talk to it because it talks to what I felt was lacking in the substantive. There was two specific skills that I thought needed to be used in the evaluation of this process in terms of the commercial property terms. The first was an understanding of alternate structuring possibilities. And the second was an assessment, independent assessment of the equitableness of the financial offer offered to the City of Vincent based on each proponent's proposed development. That's the only thing that I've asked for in this whole process that I felt was lacking from the current process. And that was important to ensure that whatever happens, because I think the qualitative stuff is going to be fantastic. All I'm talking about is the quantitative commercial return, financial return to the city, which is, you know, something I think all ratepayers care about, because the more that the city gets as a result of this transaction, and when I say more, I mean fair and equitable, that it means that there's going to be less impact on rates going forward, because the city has disposed of land and kills two birds with one stone. A great change to the amenity of a town centre, and a great commercial result for relinquishment of government land. So that's the only thing I've asked for in this process. So I'm really relieved that that councillors have and administration have recognised that commercial skills is an area that they need some assistance on, because it's not in everybody's professional experience to have the skills in this area, especially when we're dealing with property developers who know exactly what they're doing, and who obviously want to get a good result for themselves as well. So after a little bit of resistance, I'm really pleased that even the probity officer admitted in the probity certificate that it's having this commercial review is no problem. The only specification made by Stantons as our engaged property probity officer is that it occur at the end of stage 2. Right. So the outcome, this is where I see a slight problem with this. Stage 2 request for detailed proposals and information is their last opportunity to imbue any alternate considerations and ask any additional information from the proponents. We're not demanding, that they take one course of action over the other. We're just asking that they have they considered certain different things that perhaps they haven't considered. But as long as we ask that question to all proponents, I don't really understand personally why that's an issue from probity, but I'll park that. So I think it's really important. So if we don't get the information request right now, then the proponents are all going to put in whatever they think that they want to do. It's going to be viewed as what I see under this process as their best and final offer. There's the process that City of Vincent have decided to embark on seems to be one in which once you get to that point, there's no terms for negotiation. There's no, it's just pretty much put on your best offer and then it's take it or leave it. Now, other cities, Joondalup, I think John Corbellini's got experience where this whole process has happened in 2 other local governments. And at the end, because of a very broad brief and not being specific about what things that would likely be acceptable, that you get to the end of the process and the result is that, thank you, but no thank you. So you go through this process and you don't actually get the outcome that you're looking for, and that is, an outcome where you actually move on the land transaction with a good result. So this is where I have a problem about getting additional commercial advice at the end of this stage, after the information requests are done, because I think all that process will tell us, and it's still valuable, but all those consultants will tell us is that, well, perhaps you could have considered alternate structures. And if at that point, council, who will be presented with that information at that time, do agree that, yes, well, maybe we should have looked at a ground lease. We should have looked at a sale and lease back on a car parking facility, or whatever is the hypotheticals, just different situations, annuity revenue streams. Do you have a question? No. I think that all it's going to tell us is that, this process is not going to generate the result we want. So I have a little bit of, I know that we've chosen to have this very broad spectrum of brief, but I just think that we're going to go through this process without asking more harder questions about being open to alternatives, that we could get to the situation where this whole process doesn't generate a acceptable commercial result for us. I'll give you an example. City of Melville has just considered a ground lease for 13 the Esplanade.
Councillor Flo has spoken for 5 minutes.
Could I table a motion to be able to continue to speak for another 5 minutes?
Well, you've also wanted to move 4 amendments, so I think that probably gives you enough time to flesh out the issues that you wish to talk about.
So that's a no.
Well, I'll go to the governance manager. Is there such a motion in our standing orders? I can't recall one that allows an additional 5 minutes.
3 will be enough.
I believe that a member can ask or request for additional time through the chair. The chair can either grant or not grant, and then the alternative is then whether that view is agreed with and whether council decides to vote whether the presiding member's ruling be supported or not.
Councillor Apollo, can you just have 3 minutes, because I'm conscious of the fact that you have 4 amendments on the table.
Thank you, Mayor. So the City of Melville undertook a ground lease proposal on 13 the Esplanade, and they got a great result. That's to do with an aged care facility on prime land. And I'm just, I guess, where I was going with my concern with the way in which this is initially worded is that these considerations, it doesn't look like these considerations are being asked in this question. And I'll just make the last point that, you know, we're seeking strong long-term outcomes. And even if it's a slight pause to imbue this process with some additional questions, of which I think we're more than capable of doing, I just think that is from a governance perspective and from a limiting any future exposure perspective, I think it's something that we should consider. I don't personally believe that it's a probity issue, but I'll have an alternate motion at the end, which may address that, because I think it does strengthen our position on the go forward. Thanks.
Councillors, does anyone wish to speak to the substantive before we go to the amendments? Okay, Councillor Apollo, can I suggest that you start with the most simple and then move to the more complex? So the grey looks to be the most simple of your amendments. This one has not, this one's changed? Right, okay. Perhaps then we could move to the yellow. So councillor, you're moving the amendment on the yellow. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Moved by councillor Loden. Oh, sorry, seconded. Sorry, it's been a very long month.
Okay, so I think it looks like administration is supporting this, but I'll talk to it just for the benefit of the councillors. So this amendment probably, and also because you probably haven't had a chance to properly read it in advance, is really trying to ensure the valuation work that is being done, has already been requested by John, that it widens the scope of that valuation, so that if we get to the end of the process where we're looking at between a do nothing and a straight sale versus accepting one of the bids, that council would be in a better position to evaluate the options, and particularly I think the valuation on an as-is basis. So that's for those who are not aware, that the valuation that we've currently got is on a as if complete basis, where the City of Vincent the valuation we're getting is that all the encumbrances on the land would need to be fixed or quantified as to the cost to fix, and the valuation would be the balance. What a valuation on an as-is basis means is that the valuation of the properties would be sold on open market just as is, as they are. So so if you went for an auction, what would we get for it, for example? And also importantly, having an as-is valuation with a condition of also providing 400 public car parking bays is another alternate of the valuation that I think is important for council consideration to make an informed decision, because if we sold the land as is, we wouldn't have any say in the replacing of the existing car parking bays. But if we attach a condition to it, and leave it to the buyer. They can do it in any way they want, provided it fits with a legal structure plan. So once approved. So I think that these amendments strengthen council's position to make an informed decision when the time comes in what we're going to get from an independent valuer. Thank you.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to recognise Councillor Lothwell's efforts in bringing this forward. I think this is really valuable to give us that like-for-like comparison, because I would hate for us to get to the end of this process and then have these sort of, this is not quite the same thing, and therefore we're not totally confident on decision making. So it's great this has been identified and brought forward, and appreciate the administration's efforts in doing that as well. So I'm supportive of the proposed amendment.
Councillors, can I just ask a question of the director or manager? My understanding was that this was pretty much the intent, that this was going to happen as part of stage 2. Is that not the case? Your microphone's not on. It's oh dear. It's ready to have a holiday.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, that was the intent. Through discussions with council members, we've already gone out to request some quotes for a further valuation to do a lot of this, but not all of it. But yes, we completely support it.
Can you just say which bits are new that you hadn't already gone out to request?
Simply the 400 car bay. So as is with 400 public car bays provided. So that was the one bit that we haven't yet requested, but we will do that now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, look, I don't have any problem with this. I think the intention was pretty much there to look at, value to the city from all different perspectives. I probably would just say that we do need to take into consideration the Susan Gontaszewski amendment for the public open space in the frame court under the local, under the draft sorry, I'm very tired. This precinct strategy, LSP, I'm just going to call it. So we do have to take that into consideration. And also, I think in terms of seeking this information, very happy to receive it. But I think also the strong basis of going out for the request for proposals has proceeded on the basis of provision of ongoing provision of public car parking. So I think it's really valuable to have the different valuations from the, different ways that this could be treated. But I just think we do need to be mindful of the public open space and the public car parking provision, which were integral to the whole request for proposal and the leadable draft local structure plan.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, I'll just add the POS was considered in the previous valuation and will be considered again. So the same scope will apply, and the structure plan was also in the previous valuation and will be in again. So both of those things will be captured.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare the amendment carried.
Okay. Can I table this one?
You light blue?
Yeah, yes.
Is there a seconder for this amendment? Seconded by Councillor Loden.
Okay. Okay, so this amendment relates to information that we're requesting from the proponents, specifically in the attachment relating to some definitions and clarity about what we're actually asking. I think the first one, I think administration agreed with all of them except for the first one. So I'll deal with the first one first. So with the first one, the information just talks about information about the 400 public car bays. And I was looking to define that, because I think an important part of what I think we've already stipulated from the outset was that we're looking for, there's 470 bays there at the moment available to the public 24/7. And we've gone in with a minimum 400. And I think that what I'm trying to do is to try and get make clear the definition of public car bays as close to what we're providing now, so that when we start to compare the do nothing scenario and the new scenario proposed by one of the proponents, then we actually understand whether we're really getting 400 bays or it's something significantly less. For example, if a public bay, the definition could be that the parking is only available between 9 and 5. And so then that only helps people who are working or frequenting the urban centre during the day, but anyone coming for the evening won't have the same level of amenity in terms of parking available to it. Same with the situation where perhaps a proponent is using public car bay, meaning that their intent is 300 of the 400 bays is only available for monthly lease. And therefore, this is only going to benefit any businesses or people who need regular parking, but it won't help the infrequent visitor who comes to the Leederville town centre. So I think what's important about this is that we need to get a comparison against the proponents. And if we ask them if we all using the same definition about public car bays, then I think it's easier for us to compare the different positions. So I think it's a very important point. The second one I think is we've already spoken about. So I think that is clarifying the valuation component of it, which we've already talked to. I think 1.3 is talking about the public car parks and asking to ensure that the information provided includes life of asset maintenance, because that's going to be important to us, because at the moment we don't spend a lot of money on these 470 bays because it's all out. But if we're going to be seated a multi-story public car bay, the revenue that we could get could be gone if the maintenance costs on this thing is significant. So I think we need to know that, and that's asking for clarity on that. I think the 1.4 to add an additional point was for mobility impaired and elderly visitors. So I think what we're asking there is to ensure we know how much ground floor parking is available. So to actually ask proponents to actually specify that at both locations. A reference to equity partners should also be equity and debt partners, because the certain aspects of a development could be financed through debt or equity. So I think we should be complete in what we're asking. And the 1.6 is just to align the definition of market value for the MPV to the changes that were made. So I think 1.2 to 1.6 is non-contentious in that administration have agreed with my recommendation. I think 1.1 is actually critical because it's not going to, if we don't do 1.1, we are not going to have a fair comparison against the proponents when that information is there. So we need to know whether they're applying different definitions for public car parking. And we need to understand how much is really available for people 24/7. Thanks.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm broadly supportive of this. I do have a couple of questions on the 1.1 around the car parking. I don't know if you can answer this off the cuff, but we have we previously had a development on a car park that was not city owned, but we did manage. And that has a sort of reciprocal relationship whereby it's used during the day by the people in the business. So it's a private car park during the day, but then becomes a public car park during the night. I suspect that's what this comment is heading towards. So I was just hoping to get a comment from administration around that and what that flexibility might provide if it was taken out.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the comment really relates to the different models proposed. So some models that were proposed through this process were for the city to own those car parking bays. There were other models where the city would lease the car parking bays. And there was other models where the car parking bays wouldn't be run or owned or managed by the city, but by a third-party car parking management company. So it really related to that third option where that management company would have to staff and run a car park at, say, 3 a.m. on a Sunday, on a Monday morning. And so that would potentially increase the cost for that scenario to the proponents, which would reduce the return to the city. So that's really what it related to. There are obviously lots of other examples where, for example, with a sharing arrangement where that could occur. That was mainly where we were focused in that comment, an arrangement where the 400 bays just aren't required at certain times of the day in Leederville. They probably never will be at 3 or 4 in the morning. And so requiring that to be staffed and managed might reduce the return to the city under that third model. So it's not it wasn't significant, but it really comes down to the detail. Now, the city's approach and council endorsed approach was to go to the market to see what offers came. There's a set of quantitative and qualitative criteria that these proposals are assessed against. It's not just based on the financial return to the city, it's also based on the qualitative measures that council has set through the process at the start. And so both of those issues will be considered. So the number of hours the car park is available will be considered through the qualitative assessment. It might not be reflected in the dollars. And so the council might decide, and the panel might decide to recommend, and the council might decide to approve a proposal that doesn't give the greatest financial return to the city. It might decide to go with a proposal that has a greater amount of hours for parking because council considers that essential. So what we're saying is that the existing criteria and process we think covers off on that, on the issue that's been raised.
Could I make a suggestion? One of the things we're actually doing tonight is asking the stage 2 questions. So rather than defining this as a definition of public parking bays, we could simply ask the proponents to explain to us what their plan is in relation to the hours of operation and availability, et cetera, so that we can receive that information from the 3 proponents and hear what they have to say about that. Councillor Castle.
So I was still going, sorry.
Sorry, my
Yeah,
apologies.
That's all right. So I guess probably where I get to on this is I understand the intent. I still feel that there's value in us having that optionality on seeing different proposals, but it is beholden on us as council and as the administration is reviewing these to be very cognizant of that and making sure that we do call out those distinctions, because I could see a model like what is going on with that down the road could be quite beneficial, but we have to be very clear about when that's going to be available. If we see going forward that we don't need parking during the day and that parking can be used for the tenants during that time and we only need it during the night, that will, in my view, give us a much more valuable proposition put forward to us than if we say that we have to keep these bays available to the public and they're basically empty or they're used, but other parking elsewhere in the Leederville town centre is not used. So I'd take the point that we need to be very cognizant of it, but I still feel like we need to have that flexibility. So I'd be supportive of this coming forward with that 1.1 removed or edited in some way, but I can't support it as it stands.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I agree with Councillor Loden and thank you, Mayor, for your suggestion. You beat me to the punch. Because my position on this is I absolutely agree that this information is essential. And thank you to Councillor Arpaio for bringing this forward. But I do think that by creating it as part of the definition, we will limit what we can receive from proponents, and far better to have flexibility in what is proposed, but all the information available for us to make an informed decision. So I can't support it as is. If it was edited as along the lines as suggested by the Mayor or split, then I have no problem with 1.2 to 1.6. And then perhaps we can find a better way to express what we're trying to seek in 1.1.
It is an option for me to split the vote on the motion, but I'm keen to hear from other council members first. Is there any further debate on this amendment? Councillor Gontaszewski.
I have sympathy for the idea of defining what the word public means if people are not going to actually, like we've said, we want 400 public car bays. If there's contention around what that is, I think it's reasonable to ask people like the number that would comply with the definition that has been put forward, and then potentially the provision of any other parking on site that may be publicly available but not meet that definition. So I guess I would probably ask administration that, considering what Councillor Arpaio is seeking through this amendment is the ability to gather information and have it to be able to be presented in a consistent fashion, would administration see a benefit in having a definition of public car bays within this request for information?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, absolutely. We support the reference to define what public car bays are so that it's clear that they're available to the general public and that they don't need to necessarily be owned and controlled by the city, but they need to be available to the general public. We're just not supportive of the element of being prescriptive over when they are provided based on the comments already provided.
So in your view, would a public car bay still be public if it was private for 23 hours of the day and public for 1 hour of the day? And do we currently have enough information from the three proponents to actually ascertain the level of publicness and whether they would meet that definition?
Through you, Mayor Cole, as part of the stage 1 criteria, one of the non-weighted compliance criteria was for the proponents to provide their public car park design concept, proposed ownership and tenure structure, lease and management agreement, draft principles, operation management plan, and in the event of a lease or management agreement, a parking fee schedule and operating expenditure plan and a 10-year operational cash flow. This has allowed us to have some information regarding their plans for that car park. So we feel like we have enough information at the moment to understand that it is a public car park. We don't have as much information to understand the exact hours that they propose for it to be operating. Our intention was not to get that level of detail because, as mentioned previously, holding that level of detail would have a higher cost to the proponent and therefore may be at risk of reducing the return to the city.
If we're not collecting that level of detail, how do we determine the return to the city? So if as in terms of the benefit of the publicness of the car parking, if we're not asking them how public their public car parking is.
Councillor Gonchevsky, we can, because that's the purpose of this motion or this report before us, to ask questions. And if there are questions that are lacking, we can add them.
So I guess currently the stage 2 request for detailed proposal says confirmation of the total number of public car bays to be delivered. So my reading is that you could respond to that by saying 400. And I could respond to that by saying 400 public car bays and have a very different meaning of public car bays to Councillor Alexander's meaning of public car bays. Administration have stated that they would not see an issue with defining the term public, and I presume also wouldn't have an issue with defining the term public and also then allowing other collecting information in relation to the number of car bays that wouldn't meet that definition. My understanding is that at this point in time, administration's recommendation is that we only define public car bays as those that are available to the general public, but don't specify a proportion of the day. And I guess from my perspective, I probably am not supportive of that because I'm not supportive of only having public car parking available in a district centre, at night or during the day. I would struggle to say that the public car parking, in somewhere like Leederville, would be available any less than 24 hours a day. And I guess I would be interested in administration's views in relation to times of the day that public car parking would not need to be made available in Leederville if we were going to put a definition in.
Can I just ask a process question though? Because I don't have any problem with any of what's being discussed here, but I just really wonder whether at this stage of stage 2, we're actually seeking further information. I'm not sure that we're here to redefine concepts that we've already put to the proponents. So I'm a bit cautious about the difference between redefining versus going back to the proponents and saying, we would like to know more about the provision of public car parking. Can you please tell us, in addition to everything that has been outlined by the manager, we actually want to have an understanding of the hours of operation and availability through that. And I'm really more concerned about asking the question, which is my understanding of the purpose of stage 2, versus going back out and redefining something that was already part of our initial criteria.
Yeah, I take that on board and I share that concern. I think I'm just wondering whether you would split it so that there was a number in each row effectively.
This is through Mayor Cole. that's exactly the point that we were trying to make, is that we couldn't introduce a new set of requirements around what public means now. The process was open to the market to propose options. There were options around the city owning the car parking, which we would then dictate the definition of public. There was options around the city leasing, which would be the same option around a private car park and operator operating it, which would be left to the market to determine where the highest demand for parking was.
But it remains open to us to seek any further
Correct.
information, and this information can be sought as a question through the stage 2 process, and it can be coming forward as an amendment to add that to the list of questions that we have in our report.
Yes, so through you, Mayor, we could ask for the proponents to define when the parking bays would be available to the general public, i.e. Whether they be owned and controlled by the city, whether they be provided 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at casual rates, or what the rates would be at different times. So we can ask for all that detailed information.
So I assume that would need to come through as an amendment. So is it possible, manager or director, if you could potentially just have a think about the form of words that you might need? Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. So to administration, if this outcome is likely, so if we don't, this is probably the most, I think, even from the original brief, this is one of the most critical aspects. Okay, that's pretty much the only thing that we've kind of said. We're looking for a minimum 400 public car
Councillor
park.
Apollo, you can ask a question, but you can't debate.
Sure. My question is, don't you think it's a problem that if we don't have any level of definition around this, that 2 of 3 proponents could have something that's wildly different to expectation, and then they will be ruled out, and then there'll be no competitive tension left because there's only one candidate left, and the others could have said, but if you told us, we would have done it, and then we would have had 3. So do you think that this, not doing this, would have an adverse effect on the ability for the City of Vincent to have more competitive tension and have more people in the game because we're more clear about what we're looking for?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the first thing I'd say is I don't think that's going to happen given the proposals that we have. So I don't think we would end up with no competition around this issue. The council members, you have the full proposal, so you can judge that for yourself. And the second thing I'd say is we could not change the process at this point to require proposals to meet a particular definition of public car park, because that would change the process that council's already set, which was an open process, leaving it to the applicants to decide what they wanted to propose around that issue. So we would not recommend council proceed with that. And again, I just reiterate, I don't think it's going to be an issue given the proposals that we have before us.
So a follow-up question. Administration have only said delete the words provided 24 hours a day, 7 days a week per week. Is that correct? So you're happy with the rest of it, which is putting some definition around it, except for those words?
Through you, Mayor Cole, no, we don't support 1 in its entirety. But I have some wording here if you'd like to request further information from the applicants around what they're proposing in relation to the hours those bays would be available.
Perhaps we can come to that later because we're dealing with the amendment before us. I understand that John wanted to make some comments.
Through you, Mayor Cole. Look, I think the most important thing here is that under the current commercial offer, 2 of the proponents have said they will give the city 400 car bays or thereabouts. Once they are in the ownership of the city, those proponents no longer control those car bays, the city does. So therefore, the city controls how those car bays are managed, the hours of operation, how many bays are offered as full-time daily bays, how many are casual bays. Once they belong to the city, it has nothing to do with the proponent anymore. This is a decision, how those car bays are held, operated and run becomes the city's responsibility. You own it. So 2 of the proponents have already said they will give you 400 car bays. They're yours. You do with them whatever you like. This question, I feel, just confused those 2. The 3rd proponent hasn't been as clear. Okay, and therefore this question may be necessary for one of the proponents just to understand what their intention is. But working with administration in framing the questions, I think we've made it very clear that the city wants a number of car bays handed back to them in freehold ownership in one form or another. And I'll reaffirm, once it's in your ownership, you can manage those car bays however you like. And then also, just as another point of information, all three proponents provided cash flow models for the parking, which they had to do in order to establish how that income would be generated to the city. Now, all of those models completely work on casual parking for the city centre on exactly the same model as it's run now. Some have suggested slightly higher rates can be charged, but that's, again, once those car bags are handed back to the city, that's the city's decision. It won't be the proponents, they're yours.
Thanks, John. Okay, are there any further debate? I think the intention I have based on the debate that we've been having is to split the amendment into clause 1.1 and deal with that, and then to take the rest 1.2 to 1.6 on one vote. Is there any further debate or questions before I put the amendment in this way? Okay, well, I'll put 1 and 1.1 together first. So can I please have a vote in relation to clause 1 and 1.1? All those in favour? All those against? Sorry, Councillor Alexander, which way were you voting? In favour? Okay, 2 in favour, the remainder against. In relation to clauses 1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 and 1.6, and I'll take a vote on that. All those in favour? It's unanimous. So we have then adopted clause 1, clause 1.2 will become 1.1, etc. to 1.5. Director, before you leave your chair, do you have a form of words that council could consider in relation to adding a further questions to the stage 2 proposal?
I'll just ask Wendy to pop that on the screen. It will probably need a little bit of work, but we've got a starting point, perhaps. You could zoom in on that, please, Wendy. I can read it to you. So basically, it asks for the proponents to define when the parking bays would be available to the general public, i.e. owned or controlled by the City of Vincent, or provided 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at a casual rate, or another option. So we can add those last words in, Wendy, or another option. Yes.
So this doesn't have any status until a council member chooses to move it if they would wish to, but it is there if you would like to consider doing so. Councillor Uplow is moving this amendment and it's seconded by Councillor Warner. Councillor Uplow?
Yeah. I mean, just a, I don't know, it's really a question because it is the same of what I had before, but except for the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the rationale that was given as to why we shouldn't have this is to insert a definition. It's just that the definition we're proposing is not as full as the definition that was previously. So I don't understand how we can have one or the other.
This is no longer a definition, it's a question.
Yes,
so it becomes a question. It doesn't become it doesn't define public car parking. It proposes another question to be added to the list of questions that we have.
Oh, so this is attachment 3.
This is a further question to be added to the list of stage 2 questions.
But in attachment 3, because I didn't think it mentioned that.
So need to refer
Oh, no,
to.
okay, sorry. Okay. I need
So can I just, this would say that, so the existing recommendation states approves the stage 2 request for detailed proposals at attachment 3 for the second stage of redevelopment proposals process, et cetera, and that would say, sorry.
There's a question.
Does this need to say with the addition of the following questions, just to clarify that these are actually questions?
It's through Mayor Call, they're all questions.
Yeah,
So
so this will be read as a question.
yeah, they're all a request for additional information. So we're
Okay.
asking for the proponents to define
Yeah.
when their
Okay.
bays would be available to the public.
Right.
So you just need a bracket before defined, because this is all going to be in brackets after the reference to public car parking.
No,
You've got a bracket at the end. Oh,
Do we
that's
need to
relevant.
use, is the word
Oh, I see.
define creating some confusion? Can we get rid of the word define? Describe or outline would be better.
yeah, so through you, Mayor Cole, just for your benefit, Councillor Opler, I was proposing that this sit as a completely new dot point under the term, under car park. So
Yeah.
sorry, that shouldn't say under at the first mentioned reference of public car park, it should just be under the heading car park.
Like a new point.
Yeah, new point. That's right. Sorry for the confusion. I didn't look at the introductory provision.
So it should say after the heading car park,
Car park, insert new.
insert the following. Is the mover and seconder okay to accept these administrative changes?
I think after outline the parking bays. That should be public car bays. So parking bays should be public car bays.
Outline when the public car bays.
So, yeah.
I'll go to you just to check in with you, Director, with the governance hat on. We have made some administrative changes since this was moved and seconded, but from my perspective, the intent is the same. Are you happy for this amendment to move forward?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, that's correct. It's just been administrative changes. It's the same as the initial intent of the amendment.
Yep, okay, thanks. Just clarifying. Okay, so we have
Outline
the,
if and when. It should be outlined if and when the public car bays are available.
if,
If and when. Well, then say, but they'll say no, none of are available to the public.
I think they would.
That's right, but that we're asking the question, right?
Okay, this has been moved and seconded. Is there any further debate or can I please put this amendment? I'm putting the amendment. All those in favour? It's carried. Okay, that has dealt with those particular sets of amendments. I think then you'd probably want to deal with the grey.
Yep. Yeah.
You said that this is not your form of words, or there's an issue that you need to put forward a change.
It's been changed, so if maybe, John, you want to talk to it?
Could we see the new wording on the screen if possible?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. Wendy, if you could put the wording that I sent through to you, the original wording, and I'll just explain the rationale for the change. Councillor Opolo and I discussed this yesterday, and following that discussion, I made some changes which we can't see yet. Originally, Councillor Opolo had proposed that the provision state that we appoint a Big Four accounting firm, noting that if this cannot be secured, we would appoint a second tier accounting firm. Now, rather than the procurement process, once we've gone to tender, doesn't allow us to favour one set of tenderers over another set of tenderers. And so I proposed wording that stated that we would go to a Big Four accounting firm or a second tier a series of firms for quote. either Big Four or second tier or both, or a combination of the two, and that they would need to be a current member of the chartered accountants in Australia and New Zealand, and need to have the relevant experience for the scope. So that was a combination of those dot points that were originally proposed, and that was the rationale for my change to Councillor Oppollo's original wording. That was obviously, I'll leave that to you.
So the third part's come out, but I'm not going to, it's neither here nor there. I guess my question is, do we know, in your opinion, because with the change that you've made, what level of second tier firms would have the experience in property transactions, in probity and in governance, which is all part of this thing?
Yes.
I know Big Four has it.
Yes, through Mayor Cole, there are some that we're aware of that do. And at the end of the day, we'll go out to tender and the best value for money for the city will be appointed. And that's the purpose of the procurement. So a Big Four consultancy firm will certainly have the ability to deliver the scope in a superior way than most accountancy firms. There's no guarantee that one of the smaller ones won't be able to do it better, and they'd only be successful if they could do it better.
And just maybe a question as to why you feel that the third one with the commercial real estate agency isn't appropriate. So why are you opting for the accounting firm over that?
Yes, through Mayor Cole. So we would expect that the accounting firm would seek advice from commercial expertise themselves if they required that. Now, some of those firms have that expertise in-house. And those that don't, we would expect that they would provide that, gain that separately, and that they will put that in as part of their tender. But that will be part of the scope of work, that they would need to have that advice included in their assessment.
Got it. But are they allowed to do that under this?
Yeah, through Mayor Cole, yes. So it would be a single tender for a consultancy for one of these accounting firms to provide both sets of advice. We wouldn't be going to two separate consultants to provide two separate pieces of advice. We want a single set of advice that considers all of those issues together. So that was the purpose of it.
Councillor Oppollo, we don't currently have an amendment before us. Are you seeking to move the one on the grey? Are you?
I strongly feel that the Big Four have the experience to do it much better than a second tier, but I'm sure that the administration will have to consider that when they're making the appointment. So as long as that, can we just have back on the screen? It does say that they've got the relevant experience, right? Or will seek it.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm fine. I'm happy to table that one.
So you're tabling the grey? Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Oppollo. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Oppollo? Councillor Castle?
Thank you. Can I ask a question? Firstly, is second tier accounting firm something that's easily defined or determined?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it isn't easily defined, but the additional wording that sets out what each of those consultant accounting firms would be required to have is the basis for this, along with the debate tonight and the discussions that we've had with council. I mean, that will inform the scope of the work.
Thank you. And do you have any indication of what the cost of this review will be with a Big Four or a second tier?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the advice is $10,000 to $20,000.
And through you, Mayor Cole, we'll need to include this in the mid-year budget review for council to consider funding as well.
Just to follow up, I think second tier to Councillor Castle's point, second tier national firm, because maybe it could be misconstrued that second tier means just some local firm under a big four. So perhaps the second tier national firm, because that's what is commonly known in the industry, even international, but national is fine.
I think we probably just have to be a bit careful about amending amendments. I'm not quite sure if that's that's probably beyond.
Through Mayor Cole, if the seconder is supportive of that change, then it can be entertained.
Would you like to add the word national? Yep, that's okay. Right. Okay, Councillor Alexander.
I was just going to perhaps ask John, the key words there, has the relevant experience. So who is determining what the relevant experience is? And could you give us an example of that?
Yes, through Mayor Cole, I think it's pretty clear from the debate tonight that there are the big four that have the relevant experience, and a consultancy that can get up to that standard would be appropriate. But outside of that, it appears to us that the big four would be the prime candidates that have that experience. We just can't be so specific as to preclude another firm that could achieve the same or demonstrate the same level of experience.
Councillors, unless there are any further comments, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Any further comments on the substantive for those who haven't already spoken? Any further amendments, etc.? This is actually alternate. This is actually an alternate recommendation. So this would have to be moved. But if we move the substantive and it's an adopted, then I don't know that this can take any weight.
Yes, Mayor, if you move the substantive as it is, it would take precedent over the alternate because the decision has been made. So that would be the process. However, you do have a motion on the table that needs to be dealt with.
Yes. So yes, that's the way it is. I'm afraid that if council wishes to proceed as the path is set, I mean, everyone's had an opportunity to read the words on the page here, so that if you're aware, if you have any concerns about the motion that we have before us as amended and you don't wish to support it, you can vote against it. And that would then mean that this could come into play if a majority did not accept the motion before you. But if the motion before us is accepted by the majority, then this being an alternate resolution, sorry, an alternate recommendation would no longer be able to be brought forward because the decision will be made. It's can't be talked to because we have to deal with our resolution, our motion before us. So really it's just to raise awareness to all of you. You've all had the opportunity to look at this and read this. If this is your favoured approach, my advice to you would be that you would vote against this motion and then this motion could come forward. But just before doing that, because I haven't spoken, I am going to speak strongly in favour of the motion before us because I believe that that is following the resolutions of council that have set this process in train, that this has been a stepped process where council has set the criteria, has selected the consultants to assist our evaluation panel. And not only do we have City of Vincent people on that evaluation panel, but also a senior member of Development WA who brings significant expertise to this process also. And I just want to reiterate and say that I have been very happy with the way that this process has been run. I'm very happy with the quality of proposals that have come forward at this stage and look forward to getting the more detailed information through the questions that have been put through stage 2 to see where that then lands in terms of the way that we assess those different offers on the table, or whether we choose not to accept them, as you've pointed out, that also remains an option. I also think it's really valuable to note that because this is a public major land transaction, that the business case is publicly advertised, and it is also remains open that another party could come in and make an offer at that time if it's not commercial, and that it is seen, you know, another element of competition is added into this process. So just like to say thank you to the evaluation panel and the advisors for your advice to date, and look forward to continuing this process. So I'll put the motion. Yep. Yep, sure.
Thank you, Mayor. Administration, whoever, have we sought and or received any advice from Signet West about the alternate structuring models, like as in a ground lease, JV profit share, seeding public parking, alternative annuity revenue, recurring revenue streams as part of their engagement?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have discussed the different options with our commercial advisors, Signet West. The recommendation was for council to go to an open process where the market would provide options around the different approaches that could be taken, and that's the process that council endorsed.
So does the process as it's currently being run allow for questions, open questions in attachment 3 that ask the proponents whether when they provide their final submission at the end of stage 2 process, can they or will they contemplate these alternate commercial structuring models? Does the process allow it?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Cole, it does and it doesn't. So it depends on the scope of the proposal that has been lodged to this point. So some of the proponents proposed a number of scenarios in relation to the parking. And so leasing it back to the city or selling it to the city or having a third party operate it. So it allows us to ask those questions, which is what's been asked in the stage 2 questions at this point. The process doesn't allow us to now change our requirement to require a particular model or a particular type of model. It can only be within the scope of the original proposal lodged by the applicants.
I'll just clarify the question because I'm not asking them to consider or mandate a particular alternate commercial structure. I'm asking that is it permissible to ask all proponents whether, irrespective of what they've actually submitted to date, whether they have or would consider alternate structuring models that include a ground lease, joint venture, profit share, the seeding of public parking, and other alternatives that could generate annuity revenue streams to the city.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, I think the short answer to that is no, we couldn't do that at this stage of the process. We'd have to go back and ask everyone to provide us with those options. That's not the process that was endorsed by council. We asked for proponents to propose an approach to us, and we didn't set out what that would be or which options to consider other than lease, sell, or privately run. I think it was e.g. buy, lease, trade, or enter joint venture with COV. So that was part of the original proposed scope.
The clarity is we haven't, in the way that we've run this, we haven't entertained any possibility of these other types of structures which other local governments are using to good effect.
Yes, through Mayor Cole, we have entertained all of those. They were just examples that we provided in the original documentation.
If I may, the RFP process invited proponents to put proposals forward on joint venture basis, lease basis, purchase basis. That's what we went to the open market with. Okay, so we've already asked that question, and the market has come back saying don't particularly want to do that. The example you cited of Melville, which is a process we actually ran, was preferred to be ground lease because it's aged care, and aged care end users don't require freehold title. You've got a mixed use development here where components of it are very likely to be sold off. Ground lease is not very favourable to that and is a lot less attractive to the development community. So therefore, the outcome to the council may be a lot worse, not better.
didn't World Club do it for commercial property in relation to West Australian Square, and they are generating millions and millions annuity revenue each year? That's a question.
Yes, they did. But again, particular circumstances at the time in the market, with a plot ratio of a 40,000 square metre office tower right next door to them.
Councillors, I'll put the motion unless there's any further debate for those who haven't already spoken. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Declare councillor Opolo voting against, but that has passed. Thank you very much, John and Anne. Appreciate you being here. Thank you, manager. All right, so now we can go to the items we haven't already dealt with in their consecutive order. So that takes us to item 9.3, which is 21A View Street, North Perth, proposed alterations and additions to commercial premises. This is signage. Councillor Opolo.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question.
Before you talk, can I just get a seconder?
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you. Just a question, which I think we missed this in the briefing session. We kind of all skipped over it. So the sign meets the deemed to comply standards. There was no objection from the community. I just was actually, I think maybe I missed something. I just want, the question is, why is this coming to council? Because and if I'm missing something, I just want it to be brought to my attention. Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Cole, there's under the delegations, only certain types of works to state register of heritage places are able to be dealt with by administration. So this property is registered on the state list, and on that basis, given it's a signage addition, administration does not have delegation to deal with the application.
So a sign on a heritage property must come to council, and it's not within delegated authority.
Through you, Mayor Cole, that is correct for state registered properties.
Any further questions? Councillor Loden? Councillors? Okay, I'll put it, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Next item is 9.4, the signage addition to Electric Lane, Oxford Street and Ladeville. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Arpolo, seconded Councillor Alexander. Councillor Arpolo.
Yep. Thanks to administration for making the amendments to make clear that the applicants who will bear the burden read this application and not the property owner at 138B Oxford, and for making the correction regarding the applicants and naming them all and correcting the one that was incorrect. Just a couple of follow-up questions. Given this is a joint application from 7 applicants, are we actually expecting these 7 applicants to take joint public liability insurance and indemnities across all of them in their own name? Or is it just because the way this is worded, they're all jointly liable? And I just wanted to confirm that's what your intent is.
The intent is to ensure council is held not liable for anything that occurs, and ensuring that one of the applicants at least, if not them severally, undertake the indemnity.
I think if that's your intention, I'm not sure the recommendation is worded that way. It refers to the applicant defined as all of them. So perhaps if that's your intention, we might want to table an amendment. But I guess my follow-up question to that is, there's individuals and then there's companies, and I think that probably if you looked into it, some would be more financially viable than others. And then, so if you say one is going to do it versus the others, how would you ensure that the one that you choose, or the one that they choose, has the necessary financial means to supply those indemnities?
through the chair, city intends to go through the process of ensuring that the license arrangement for this is quite clarifies those issues quite clearly, that the applicants will bear the burden of any issue that arises. There will be a requirement for insurance cover to be there. The applicants then will be responsible for that. Will we undertake any assessment whether they have the financial capacity of doing something to be able to pay should an incident occur? Not in respect to a development of that nature and size. The expectation that is that the insurance would be sufficient to cover it.
Look, I'm supportive of this, so I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to make sure that what's on the page is your intent. So my follow-up question is, do you think we need to table or does someone need to table amendment to affect what you're saying in relation to those points, or you think it's fine?
Through the chair, very comfortable with the manner in which the recommendation is there. It's the city's intent to ensure that we protect the city at all times in respect to these issues, and we'll do its utmost to do so in respect to the agreement and the insurance coverage.
All right, my second question, I'm not, I'll take your word for it, but it currently reads that all of them are liable. But anyway, the recommendation doesn't specify, this is really important, I think, it doesn't specify who's actually bearing the cost of the sign and the electricity. But in the briefing notes, when I asked the question, the response to this question was that the landowner of 138B Oxford and the applicant. So could you just clarify it? Because, and whether, why isn't a recommendation here about who is going to actually pay for the electricity and the cost of the sign installation?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, in terms of the briefing note response, given the sign is affixed to the building 138B Oxford Street, in confirming with the applicant, who is not the owner of that adjoining building, they've confirmed that it's going to be at that cost. Now, whatever the arrangements are that they have with 138B, in which the sign is affixed to, is a matter for the applicant to arrange. That is why the briefing notes reference the applicant, and an example, it's possible that they would have some arrangement with that building owner to ensure that the cost is covered by themselves.
And through you, Deputy Mayor, I just add in relation to the previous question, the applicants are a syndicate, so they currently have an arrangement. So we don't see that there would be any issue with them entering into an indemnity agreement with the city, because they are one body. They're just separated individually because of yeah, that's right.
I'm comfortable with that. My last question is, do you think that we need to add, would you be supportive, and do you think it's necessary to add point 6 to this agenda item recommendation, that the applicants will be responsible for the cost and maintenance of the sign and the ongoing electricity cost? And whether they decide to get that from or partly from the owner of 138B, is it not important to add that so that we know who is paying for the cost and maintenance, including electricity?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, condition 4 does refer to the maintenance of that sign in itself. It is not explicit in terms of payment for electricity. It's from a planning perspective, what's being asked of council to consider is the sign appropriate in terms of, does it fit into the area? That's really what the test is. Does it fit into the town centre setting, and do the conditions ensure that it wouldn't prejudicially impact the area? So in terms of payment and costs for electricity, I feel like that is beyond the scope of the planning approval and the terms of the conditions. You're required to obtain arrangements to have electricity and other services for different types of development. So I don't feel like that is necessary to include as a specific condition in the recommendation.
And then just through you, Mayor Cole, if I could just quickly add, in relation to compliance, the applicant is the one that's liable. So the city would pursue the applicant if there was an issue around maintenance or something happened with the sign. We wouldn't be pursuing the owner.
Great. So I won't propose an amendment, but I got you on record that the city is not paying for the cost of the sign, the maintenance of the sign, or the electricity for the sign.
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Castle.
Thank you. I have a question. Just thank you for the images that were provided in the briefing notes. I did feel that the words in the blue words were not very legible. And I just wondered if the that design is finalised or if there's scope to have further discussions with the applicant about the exact colouring, just to ensure. It might be that those images don't really give us the best indication of what they will look like, but I just thought, is it possible to go back to them throughout this process to ensure that that they are in a legible colour?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that image was prepared with minimal time. With all due respect to the applicant, it was intended to give you an indication of really the colour at night. You'll see through that render, the area is actually blue, which is probably not accurate in terms of nightfall, right? So, but accept your comment in terms of how it does appear in terms of that render. There is obviously a benefit for the lighting colour to be distinct so that you can actually read the text. And I think that's every intention of the applicant.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate that might not have been the best depiction of it. So as long as there will be a consideration of that through the process, I'm happy with that.
Councillors, I'm happy to support this. I think that it is quite not immediately obvious when you're at Electric Lane, because the fact that you've got the two buildings on either side with quite long blank walls. I do think this will really help people, draw people down and have a much greater awareness that there are places to eat and buy coffee. There's a couple of new tenancies that are soon to open up, a lot of busy work happening down there. So I think it is important that this signage draws people down the laneway and creates more connection to those businesses down there. Unless there are any further comments, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. That takes us to item 9.5, local planning policy restricted premises smoking. Councillor Hallett is moving, seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you. Just a big thank you to administration for all your work in taking this forward since I first raised it as a notice of motion a few years ago. This is an important initiative that puts into practice the public health leadership that is a central pillar of our public health plan. Tobacco remains our leading preventable cause of death and disease and is an insidious industry that kills 2 in 3 of those who consume its products, exactly as the manufacturer advises. Opportunities for this industry to market its products have been removed in a range of ways through other tiers of government, and this policy enables us to use our local planning policies to reduce these opportunities further. The lack of meaningful intersection between the state planning framework and public health priorities is an ongoing challenge that we need state government action to address. But in the meantime, this is an important step forward and sets a precedent for other local governments who are looking at this closely.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just very quickly, very happy to support, and thank you to administration for all their work, and particularly to Councillor Hallett for his leadership in this space. I think this is a very worthwhile initiative for council to be addressing.
Councillors, any further comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Next item is 9.8, Mount Hawthorn Youth Skate Space, moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I'll be super quick. And I really just want to acknowledge the work of our staff in preparing this, acknowledge the donation or the what do you call it, election commitment from the Honourable John Carey. But I particularly want to acknowledge the members of the working group. They've come together on a number of occasions over several months to assist with both technical design and placement of the skate facility, and with bringing a community focus to what is required. So particularly want to thank Tim Ewan from Skate Sculpture, Megan Hammond and Matthew Bailey from Mount Hawthorn Primary School, Sonia Hills from John Carey's office, and Trent Durwood from Leaderville Connect, who all contributed to the plan that we have before us, which I'm very happy to see progressing to the next stage.
And I'm sure the children are too. Any further comments? Sorry, Councillor, go to second to first. No, go ahead, Councillor Apollo.
Yeah, this is a great concept plan. I like it. Just have a question. So the concept plan has been designed for to a construction budget of 200,000, which is the amount of funding received by the state government, as mentioned. The funding agreement term is due to expire 30 June 23. My question is there any prerequisites in terms of concept specifications that the funding needs to adhere to qualify for that funding? And the second part of the question is, does construction need to be completed by 30 June 2023 or just started, or what's the requirements around ensuring that we do receive the 200,000?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the election commitment was for a new skate scooter park in Mount Hawthorn, so we're confident that that will match that. At the moment, the election commitment is for it to be all expended by 30 June. So that would mean that the skate park would need to be complete, because we would not expend that money without it being complete. There have been instances in the past where we have requested for an extension of that time. At this point, we are not doing that, and we are working to 30 June for completion.
So it's not long. So you think there's no risk that that it won't be completed before 30 June 23? Because then my question is, what mitigation measures, i.e. the extension, would we be trying to secure to make sure that the funding doesn't slip through?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, it is a very short time frame. When we would know more information about that would be when we go out to tender. We plan to do that first thing in the new year for a design and construct of the skate park. It would be when we receive those responses back that the suppliers that are responding to that tender would voice their inability to do the timeframe, because the timeframe would be a main portion of going out to that tender. If that was voiced to us, then that's when we would request that extension of timeframe. But we have worked as diligently as possible to try and not do that.
Councillors, any further questions or comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. It'd be nice if it could be done by Christmas for the children, but I guess that's a bit too much to ask. Bit too much. Okay. Next Christmas. No, not next Christmas. Okay, so that completes our strategy and development items. We have also dealt with our infrastructure and environment items for the evening. So, and our community and business services items. Oh, sorry. Yes, I accidentally crossed this out and then did draw an arrow to remind myself that we have a financial interest for Councillor Warner on this one. So we do need to deal with 11.2, and Councillor Warner will just leave the chamber for this item. So this is item 11.2, authorisation of expenditure for the period 1st to 31st of October 2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Woden. Did that mean you want a second? He moved.
I'm just tabling it to table it. Yeah, thanks.
Yep, okay.
I support Councillor Wallace's tabling the table.
Any further questions? Or
Can
comments?
I just ask a question? So I read the briefing notes, which maybe I didn't read them close enough, that basically said approving expenditure would not generally require affect financial interest from a councillor, because otherwise we'd be approving, we'd all be out of the room every month because we get paid. So can I just get some clarification as to why Councillor Warner is not in the room to approve this expenditure?
Through the chair, in respect to councillor fees and charges, they are a specific exemption from having to declare. So there is no requirement to do so. Councillor Warner, in the payments was received a payment through her business, which is not council fee connected, and therefore it's appropriate for a financial interest to be declared in that payment.
So has the payment already been made?
Yes, albeit council could choose not to approve the payments, and then the city may have to pursue a path to recover it.
Nothing further, thanks.
Councillors, any further questions? Okay, I'll put the expenditure. All those in favour? Declare that carried. That's Susan. Councillor Warner, no, she can come back. Okay, item 12.2 is the council recess period for 2022-23 delegated authority to the CEO. It is an absolute majority decision, which is why we do need to vote on this one. Any questions in relation to this item? Oh, sorry, mover and seconder, please. Moved by councillor Iapolo, seconded by councillor Loden. Any comments or questions?
Yes, I have two questions. Does this adequately provide delegated authority to an acting CEO when the CEO is on leave during the period?
Through the chair, yes.
I suspected that, so I've got a second question. Should this necessarily exclude any item relating to the acting CEO's normal role for the purpose of segregation of duty, just so that they're not approving as acting CEO something that relates to their own department?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. So when an officer is acting in a different role, their powers in their substantive role disappear, and they take up the powers in the acting role. So the officer that would then act in their substantive role would take on those powers, and so the separation of duties would remain. So you can't take your powers from one role to another role. You leave those behind and you take on the powers of the role you're acting in.
I could probably just say that another way, Mayor Cole. The delegations register relates to the position, not the person. People can change, it's the position. So which it doesn't matter which person's in the position has the delegation, not the person.
Okay, noted. All I ask is maybe consider that, whether that's appropriate in the future, because, you know, governance and segregation, I take your argument, but yeah, I would have some concern, but I'm not going to table any amendment.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, the only thing I'd add is just for your comfort, that's the way the city runs the process. So we don't allow officers to continue to use the powers of both roles at the same time. It's not permitted, it's not allowed. So that's how we operate.
Councillors, any further questions or comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Okay, so that takes us to notices of motion. And we have item 13.1, Councillor Dan Loden, compulsory citizenship ceremonies. Councillor Loden, I assume you're moving your notice of motion. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, ma'am. I think this is well, I guess probably the majority of this is relatively straightforward in terms of outlining some of the facts and realities of this. The key point is around requesting the administration, the CEO, to engage with the relevant minister to request approval to not host, to no longer be required to host a citizenship ceremony on Australia Day. Excuse me. So, The basic logic of this comes from we weren't required to host a citizenship ceremony on Australia Day until relatively recently.
Can I just add, sorry, just pick this up from a protocol perspective. Normally the elected member or the mayor would write to a minister, not the CEO.
So as in my motion is incorrect, or I spoke incorrectly to it?
No, that just in clause 4, it would be normal that a mayor would write to a minister and the CEO might write to a head of department, just from a protocol perspective.
Okay, so I'm going to amend it now, if I could, to make it correct.
Is that okay with the seconder? Okay, so just to clause 4 now states request the mayor writes to the relevant federal minister. And you can add, if you like, and the CEO departments, but I think the whole point is that you write to one. Sorry, I didn't pick this up earlier, but previously it was me writing to the minister, and then that becomes correspondence that then is furthered onwards to the department.
Thank you for the clarification. So I guess my starting point for this is really around recognising the long-standing relationship the City of Vincent has with the traditional owners. That's something that we've been actively involved in for a number of years now through our RAP, through engaging with the, oh God, it must be the end of the year. Yes, sorry, okay. What I'm seeking here is recognising that Australia Day establishes the first permanent European settlement, and that this effectively is the point at which white settlers dispossessed Aboriginal people. This is a point of contention for many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And effectively what we do is we have a celebration on that day every year. It's kind of the equivalent of kicking someone out of their house and then having everybody over for a barbecue to celebrate. Which is a little bit offensive, I think. Did want to acknowledge the Mayor and the CEO's support in connecting with the Aboriginal Elders Group, which we did the other week. And the feedback that we received from the Elders Group was quite strong in this regard. They're supportive of this going forward. Where I get to on this is, and I recognise that this is not something that's consulted with the City of Vincent community, but it has been engaged with our Elders Group. And they are the most aggrieved by this. They've shared some of their experiences in this space, not just around Australia Day, but broadly around treatment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that they've experienced themselves. And we're all well aware of the long-standing history of treatment towards Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. They've requested that we do this as part of this process as well. And so the motion acknowledges their request. And basically what I'm asking of council is recognising that request coming from the Elders Group, that we therefore pass on that request to the Mayor to write to the relevant minister, such that we do no longer have to hold a citizenship ceremony on Australia if we so wish. Broadly, it's not something that we want to do as a council. We are forced to do it. We make not particularly, we make that the lowest key citizenship ceremony that we do in the year because of that offence. And I guess the very idea that you are forced to celebrate something kind of is a bit of an oxymoron in that context as well. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Yes, I am fully supportive of this notice of motion. I think it's very important that we're acknowledging the impacts and the position of the Elders Group in particular, and I'm really grateful that we've been able to engage with them on this and actually speak to, as you say, the most aggrieved parties in our community. I think it's really important to acknowledge that as a council, we have limited power to affect change in this in relation to the bigger issue here. But what we do or would like to have power is how we celebrate or not this particular day. At the moment, as Councillor Loden has said, we are forced to hold a ceremony on that day. And so we're simply asking the minister to give us the option to not celebrate anything on the day. We don't do any other celebrations or ceremonies or festivals or picnics or anything else in the city of Vincent on Australia Day, which we have chosen not to do that for good reason. And I think this is the last piece of that particular puzzle, to have the ability to choose another day to recognise new citizens, of which we have a number of options throughout the year. So it's really not impacting them in any material way. So I'm fully supportive, and I think that it's an important position for us to take as a council.
Councillor Apollo.
I want to thank Councillor Loden for bringing this one up, because this actually gave me hours and hours of thinking. It's actually a complex issue. Showing compassion and respect to the sensitivity of traditional owners is unequivocally justified. No question. On the flip side, and it may not be your intent, but some could infer this as being repudiation of January 26 for all events, for all celebrations. And I'm not sure if that is the intent, and or diminishing, and probably more importantly, diminishing the celebratory spotlight for community diversity in the form of new immigrant arrivals. Look, I pondered this question in considering this motion. Where I land was similar to Councillor Loden, in a sense that I think the approach that needs to be adopted here is to detach the nexus between citizenship ceremonies for new arrivals and the anniversary of European arrivals. After all, new arrivals can come from anywhere in the world, so we don't need to stick with that tradition. I totally agree with that concept. And when we view this through that prism, the question shifts to, and I think this question needs to be asked, what is the logically significant date for new arrival citizenship ceremonies to occur? And I'm just wondering, and this is a comment and a question to administration, has anyone actually asked the traditional owners what is the most significant day in the modern calendar that they and their ancestors celebrate an important aspect of this land and this country? If we don't have the answer to that question, is it worth deferring this to consult with the elders on that question? Because if we have an alternate date and not just say we're going to celebrate immigrants or the citizenship of new arrivals on just any other date, strengthens the likely success, I think, of achieving the intent of what Councillor Loden is in seeking to achieve, without diminishing the perceived sense of occasion for these new immigrants. So I'm really supportive of the idea not to necessarily do it on this day. I just think there would be more chance of success if we actually ask elders what would be a good day to celebrate Australia and new arrivals, and actually mark that day as a dedicated day of celebration for these new citizens. And I think for the intent that you're trying to achieve, both to respect our traditional owners, but also not downplay the celebratory nature of a citizenship ceremony for new arrivals, I think we need to give them a day and not just say, we'll just do it any other day. So I'm supportive of the motion, but I also wish, and I think the strength of this would be much more successful if we had another date that we could point to. And I think my question to administration in closing is, have we asked the elders what day would be, what's the day that they think is most significant to celebrate this land?
Traditionally, that's NAIDOC week, but I don't think it's about asking them the question. I'm answering this question because I was at the elders meeting. I think that's really about answering the question of the 26th of Australia being Australia Day. So
yes, we currently hold 3 other citizenship ceremonies. Those are determined by administration on the day they choose. Broadly, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people don't subscribe to the modern calendar. So they've got in Noongar, it's 7 seasons, but they don't have a day or a date. It's just determined by change of the seasons and things like that. So they don't have a particular date. It's more a view of just don't do it on that day. So I think broadly, they'd probably be happy if we did it on literally any other day of the year except for the 26th, is.
Okay, I might hand over to Councillor Gontaszewski now, who wishes to speak.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just look, following along from that, Councillor Loden is correct. I think one of the great privileges of being a councillor is to be able to attend citizenship ceremonies. They're wonderful evenings to be part of. I've been to citizenship ceremonies on a Wednesday in November. I think they're usually on a Wednesday in April, Wednesdays, throughout the year. And I don't believe that those ceremonies are diminished at all by being held on, sort of something of an arbitrary day that is determined by the number of guests that we fit in the hall, the availability of, key participants, as in, we don't do them on Tuesday nights when the mayor can't be there to preside because she's got a council meeting. We schedule these things. There is an administrative component in scheduling these events. And on the few occasions that I've had the honour of presiding over those ceremonies, I have spoken about their journey to citizenship for Aboriginal people, and how they've been on this land for 65,000 years, and not much more than 50 years ago were given the right to citizenship in this country. And so, yes, thank you, Councillor Loden, for bringing this forward. I have no intention of turning away from the discomfort of others, and I think that this would make me feel much more comfortable if we had the opportunity to consider any other day, knowing that the City of St Vincent citizenship ceremonies are one of the things that make me proudest to be a councillor, when I see how administration runs these ceremonies, when we consider the speakers, the welcome to country, the performers that we've had throughout the years. They are really great ceremonies to be part of, whatever day they're held. So I'm very happy to move forward. And whilst I think we need to absolutely acknowledge the wonder of multiculturalism in Australia, we need to continue to pursue that goal along with our goal of reconciliation. And I think this is a step towards that, small one, but I think significant nonetheless.
Councillors. Councillor Alexander.
Our daughter-in-law is up for a citizenship, and I run it past her, and she just wants to get a citizenship, so she doesn't mind the date. Have we checked with the federal minister? Because I presume that's something they're probably going to do anyway. So maybe it might be worth checking with the federal minister. Are they going to do that anyway? And have we run it past our RAP Reconciliation Working Group? They've been consulted. Yeah.
So we haven't had a formal proposal come to the RAP working group on this, but there has been discussion in working group meetings about this. There is strong support from the Aboriginal members of the RAP working group to change that. In fact, they tend to sort of come up. I think the topic would be, what are we going to do next? Oh, let's change the date. So
I just thought
there is a level of
you've got a
support,
working group, and it would be normal to work with them.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Any further comments? Councillor Warner.
I feel like I need to say something because everyone else has. Thank you, Councillor Loden, for bringing this. As a member of the RAP group, I agree that this is something that has been discussed. And when I read about this and how it was brought on as a compulsory thing, it wasn't always the case. These citizenships ceremonies are always held on this date, and that it's become a compulsory thing. I was quite dismayed at that. So I really support us making these steps. And also from another completely different angle, admin did mention that because this is a public holiday, the actual costs and the resources of trying to create this event on this day when the council is in recess, when it is a public holiday, it just comes at a greater financial and resource cost to the administration. So if we can actually put that stuff into a better way, into using it at a better time, I think that's a win-win.
Thank you, Councillor Warner. Councillors, I'm happy to speak to this. This actually came up in 2017 when the former Minister David Coleman Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs, released the Australian government's review of the Australian Citizenship Code, Citizenship Ceremonies Code, and basically said we're making some changes to the code, and one of the changes we're making is that local governments will be required to hold a citizenship ceremony on Australia Day, the 26th of January, or you will no longer be able to have the powers to confer citizenship. So if you don't hold the day, hold the citizenship on that day, you will not be able to have any citizenship ceremonies. So at that time, I wrote back to the minister as part of the consultation and basically said, we do not support this change to the code to require local governments to hold citizenship ceremonies on the 26th of January. It's important for local governments to retain flexibility. We need consideration of our business commitments, the management of numbers of conferees, and we also need to be responsive to our own community's values and wishes on matters such as reconciliation. At the time, I appeared in the West Australian and received a lot of hate mail from a lot of older white men living in Western Sydney. And despite that being deeply unpleasant, I was quite proud to be part of this request. I mean, really, it's interesting that we're still talking about this, because when you think about trailblazers in this space, it has to go to Brad Pettit and the City of Fremantle, who took this debate to the national level. Every year there are polls on whether Australians want to retain the National Day on the 26th of January, and you can see there's definitely creeping movement towards the no, particularly in the younger community members. But for me, this is really about how our Aboriginal community and elders feel about this. And I have actually seen the discomfort of Aboriginal representatives who come to the citizenship ceremony on Australia Day to give a welcome to country. And it does make me feel deeply uncomfortable that they feel that way. Not everyone will come. I know that the Noongar Choir chooses not to come to our citizenship ceremonies if they're on Australia Day, but we still do manage to have an Aboriginal representative there. And I can tell that it is not, that it does cause distress, and that sometimes they will bring a sibling with them or bring a support person with them, and they will come. But I think that increasingly over time, we'll find that there's less willingness to do that. It was raised with our elders group last week. Was it last week, Dan? 2 weeks ago? And they were very resounding in their support for this. So it happened in 2017 under the former government. I do have to say that I believe the current federal government's priority is voice to Parliament. So I'm not sure that our request will automatically be an easy request, because I do understand that their focus is on voice to Parliament, that they will want to be ultra focused on that referendum will be coming up next year, that they may not choose to deal with this right now, but it is a consistent position that we've had since the code was changed in 2017. And I think there's nothing wrong in writing that letter and asking. It might be parked for a bit whilst Voice for Parliament takes precedence. And I think that is also something that the City of Vincent will be participating in. We've already said to our elders that we'd like to talk to them at our next meeting in February about how we participate, what we do during that time. We have historically had a strong voice on issues of representing our community during national debate, and everyone that will hear will remember the Vincent Loves Love campaign that we ran during the marriage plebiscite. Probably one of the proudest things that I feel the City of Vincent has done in that space of recognition and equity. And I think that there's another space for us to take this on as part of local government. I think that there are 3 local governments in Western Australia so far that have supported the Uluru Statement from the Heart, being ourselves, Bayswater and Fremantle. And there's already movements between local governments for statements on mayors for the Voice to Parliament. I've received a letter which I'm happy to share with you and seek your endorsement to sign from Darcy Byrne, the Mayor of the Inner West Council, who has started this movement. And given that that's in line with our resolution about 12 months or so ago on the Uluru Statement of the Heart, it seems that that's strongly in alignment. So from the perspective of this being a position that we've had, we put this position forward in 2017. It's about going to the new government and asking them, now that we've had a different approach, fresh change, obviously a government that's very interested in Aboriginal representation, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander representation, that this is something that we feel we will have more chance. Just cautioning though that this may be something that Voice might go first before this debate is then taken on, because it is very closely linked to this idea of the change the date. So happy to support this and happy to continue to support this, and very much value the input of our elders in making their position very clear on this. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. Notice of motion number 2 is 13.2 from Councillor Ashley Wallace, Local Planning Scheme number 2, amendment regarding service stations. Moved by Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. So the thrust of this amendment is to alter service stations from being a discretionary use in a couple of areas to a prohibited use in mixed use and local through regional centres in our local planning scheme. So I think thank Mr. Meyer for his comments from earlier from the gallery. I think they were given in general support of the motion. Just address the comments made regarding a prior development application on Brisbane Street for a service station that was approved. I think there's a number of material differences between that and what's proposed on Angove, not least of which was that land use wasn't even a question on Brisbane Street due to the existing approval. Generally, though, the city admin and council set out to be proactive in planning policies, but where that wasn't done or wasn't possible, the next best available option is to be reactive. I think it's clear since the last time the local planning scheme was updated, a process that included a very large community consultation process. There's been a change in attitude in the community around the appropriate locations for service stations. This amendment or this motion, sorry, seeks to address that gap in planning policy and make service stations a prohibited use within mixed use and local through regional centres. Fossil fuel use and the internal combustion engine are in decline, and the build out of further infrastructure in support of those, particularly within sensitive areas, is in contravention with a number of objectives of the strategic community plan and the accessible city strategy. Service stations themselves are a leading cause of soil, groundwater and air contamination within the city, and on a number of occasions have resulted in human and environmental health impacts outside of their respective lots. Volatile organic compounds such as benzene, along with a suite of other common contaminants in petrol and diesel, are mobile within groundwater and move with it beneath our community. The volatility of those substances can result in measurable air quality impacts some distance from the contaminant source. So these proposed changes will not prohibit the construction of service stations within Vincent, however, will restrict new stations from areas where their amenity and health impacts would be most felt.
Very nicely stated. Thank you, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mayor
Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm fully supportive of this notice of motion. I think that as Councillor Wallace has outlined, where we see an issue arising that cannot be addressed through the current planning scheme, that we have the option to try and plug a hole, so to speak. And it's something we've done in the past in relation to other little tweaks to our planning scheme where we've seen an issue arising. And I think this is an appropriate way to deal with an emerging issue that is becoming clear, that the health impacts of having a service station in sensitive areas, including town centres and mixed use zones, is the right way forward for us to explore.
Thanks, Councillor Castle. Councillors, any further comments?
There's two of us who don't have this motion. Where would we find it?
It's in the agenda. If you go to the full agenda paper, it's under on page 1355.
I don't individually.
Is that records?
Can I just, clearly I'm not going to have time to read it, but was administration in support of this?
Yes.
Okay.
Councillors? Look, I'll also speak in support of this. I'm very happy to see Councillor Wallace bring this forward. And I think that we have been having, it's interesting because it's almost like we had childcare emerge where we sort of had maybe one childcare application in many years, then all of a sudden we had a flurry and we sort of, needed to update our childcare policy because it wasn't really responding to the fact that we suddenly had this flurry of applications. And whilst we haven't had a flurry of petrol station applications, we have been seeing more of them. We had the application in 2017 on Scarborough Beach Road, where we now have the Red Cross shop, which was adjacent to a childcare, directly opposite to a childcare and horizontally adjacent to the local primary school. That application came to council. I was the mayor at the time, and we unanimously refused that on the basis of it being very close to sensitive land uses, on the fact that this is close to not just to those two sensitive uses, but also abutting residential, that we were very concerned about the traffic impacts and all the rest of it. So I think we have had a pretty strong position. And Councillor Wallace has sort of talked to the issue that we had with that more recent application across from the Perth Rectangular Stadium. So that was difficult, but I think that we are potentially going to see more of these because we've seen applicants go in to look at those very small workshop based, where there's a couple of houses, and actually to start to look at those sites again. In this, this is obviously something that is causing great concern. And not only is it about the impacts of a service station, or all of those things that you've mentioned already, which I won't reiterate, Councillor Wallace, but also it's about the style, the look and feel of these types of petrol stations that we're seeing with the great big monolith signs and the wanting to have the co-location with the fast food. Like, it's actually, there's several factors here that go into this. So very happy to support this. I think this will give the community some comfort in knowing where the council sits on this. And I think that for anyone coming in and making an application for a service station, they will realise that, once that ceases operation for 6 months, it is automatically becomes non-conforming. Once it ceases, that's it has to go. So it is also, I think, a disincentive for any future applicants to come forward, because it does somewhat limit the lifespan of an approval in these areas. So thank you for this, and thank you for the support of the officers in this. I know, Director, you were supportive of this from the get-go, and appreciate you putting this forward as well as an option. So hopefully this provides, whilst we can't do retrograde application of this, and it will take time, I think it does really show the community that we're listening and that we understand that nobody wants to live next door to a petrol station. Nobody wants a petrol station near a childcare or a school. They do have to go in the right location for people to be comfortable with their locations. So, and we might end up in the future with having some more EV power stations around instead of petrol bowsers, but that future is not yet with us. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop there and see if anyone else wishes to make any further comments. Okay, we'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Do you have one further notice of motion this evening? Sorry, docs on tap is blank.
Through Mayor Cole, that's 13.3, just before it's moved. Just going to make another comment, slightly different to my previous one, just about the conflicts of interest. There's a benchmark or bar set earlier on with the declarations of interest about when it's prudent to declare, and one of the declarations tonight was that one of the councillor's neighbours had chickens, which sort of indicates that if there's a thought that there's an interest, or there's a doubt that whether there's an interest, it's probably prudent to declare that. Another councillor was considering whether there's a proximity interest due to the property being co-located next to one of 200 areas that have flooded in the last 10 years. So that became an impartiality interest. So just a general view and our advice always is, it's always prudent to declare. There is literally no downside to declaring. The upside of declaring is it just protects the councillor from the potential for a complaint being made. So we always recommend declaring if there's doubt. It's always prudent to declare, and there's no downside to declaring an interest if there's some doubt.
So yeah, can I just ask a question? Because as mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, council has received some very detailed advice in the briefing notes under the authorisation of expenditure. Just to reiterate that if a declaration is not forthcoming, is there any risk for council? If my understanding is that if the declaration is not made, then council just has to proceed, and that's not something that council needs to be concerned about from a risk perspective for ourselves.
Through Mayor Cole, I'll ask the Acting Executive Director to comment. We're supportive of the notice of motion. There was a discussion early on about whether or not the same notice of motion in identical terms could be put by another councillor, and then that essentially avoids that being an issue at all if it was put by another councillor, and the subject matter and the intent of it is something we agree with and do support. But I'll just ask the Acting Executive Director to comment on the other aspect.
Thank you, CEO. Through the chair, it's up to the obligation resides solely with individual council members to determine whether they have an interest or not, and up to them to make that declaration. Should a council member decide that they do have an interest, albeit seek opportunity to participate, then council gets to have an opportunity to determine whether the extent of that interest is relevant or not. But it resides with the council member. I don't believe it jeopardises council's decision making.
Thank you. I just wanted to seek clarity, given that that information has gone to all council members.
Through Mayor Cole, another comment. This is the notice of motion about a master plan and a strategy. It's a very different nature of a decision than, say, a quasi-judicial decision around a planning item, for instance, where decisions made under the Planning Act. This is something related to the Local Government Act. So the nature of the interest could be related to the type of decision that council would be making, and also the risk of whether or not that could be perceived as a conflict of interest by an aggrieved third party, for instance, in a planning application. But that's not what's being proposed at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have item 13.3, notice of motion, Leederville Oval Master Plan. Who wishes to move this? Councillor Ipolo is moving this motion, seconded by Councillor Gontszewski.
I'll start by saying I swear that I will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interests of the people of City of Vincent, and that I will faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in me under the Local Government Act. That's the what we swear in. I'm not sure why there's so much comment. I mean, I may have a personal opinion about whether certain endorsements can affect people's impartiality, but I don't have to repeat it in this chamber. I just think it's up to the person to make the declaration. And
Councillor Ipolo, you've asked a series of questions about interests that Cygnet West and the probity advisor have asked. I've asked it because we have been given very detailed advice. I think it's reasonable to ask.
I've considered, but it's been, the point I'm trying to make is it's been 10 times. I mean, I understand the duties I have. I can't lie. If I don't think if I honestly believe there's no financial interest in relation to this motion, then I'm not going to lie and then just disclose it.
We have established that it's your obligation only, and I was only concerned with making sure that there was no risk to council members. So that's been cleared. It is your obligation, and you make that decision.
But when it keeps repeated and repeated, you're building a perception, and that's what I'm getting a little annoyed about. It is my decision. I've looked at it. I've asked for, I'll even get legal advice. I asked for the Department of Local Government's opinion on the matter. It hasn't been forthcoming. I asked weeks ago about that. I've applied to the City of Vincent for reimbursement of legal fees to get that legal advice because it relates to duties. I still haven't received a response. This motion doesn't relate to, I'm not endorsing any action. It's about having a plan which I'd like to talk to once someone seconds it, which has.
It has
done.
been seconded.
Okay. I want to make the point that I'm not endorsing anything. I'm not endorsing any developments. I'm not endorsing development. I think that it's long been considered in this council that there's two issues that we have with sustainability of our infrastructure. One is Beatty Park and the other one is Leederville Oval. And it's come up time and time again as issues that we have as a council, and we are making very slow steps on Beatty Park. We haven't come to a conclusion on that, and we have no plan, because a plan was adopted by a previous council in relation. There was a master plan that was drafted but never adopted. Thank you. So we don't currently have a plan for it, which is a big issue. And so what this motion is trying to do is actually just to say, can we have a plan? I'm not endorsing any action specifically, but I think as a council, and a requirement for our ratepayers is that we actually need to have a long-term plan, because it's we're having to make decisions about short-term issues that we would need to have. If we had a long-term plan, we would be able to make better decisions about it. So what this motion is proposing is really just for the CEO to form a project working group to input into that, to take whatever the existing plan was that wasn't adopted, and perhaps work on it so that we and ratepayers have some idea about what we want to do, if anything, at this site. Again, I'm not proposing that development occur. I'm not saying that development shouldn't occur, but what is relevant here is that that there's been renewed interest with funding, because the reason why we haven't been able to come up with a plan in the future was there was no funding, right? So there's renewed interest from the WAFC and the AFL based on the ground being so successful with the 2002 Waffle Grand Final. Administration's already identified that the lease agreements at the site don't really align with the City of Vincent's financial interests long term. There is an opportunity which was out of scope in the past about whether the functionality of that land could be broader for community use. I think we should consider that as a group. It's been mentioned to the audit committee that the inadequacy of City of Vincent capital and operating budgets to undertake necessary repairs to ageing infrastructure is an issue and identified as an audit risk. So that's a potential risk that needs to be addressed by this local government. The OAG audits have identified asset sustainability ratios as an issue. Therefore, we need to address it. And we have someone on council who has significantly relevant experience in this space. That is Councillor Alexander, a past VFL Waffle player, an AFL coach, a director administrator within the Department of Sport, and a chair of the steering committee for the development and build of Optus Stadium. So that's a significant experience that could be relevant in this as part of the composition of a working group. So what I'm tabling here today is to ask the CEO to start a working group to start to think about what the long-term plan is, that should be chaired by, I'm proposing that should be chaired by Councillor Alexander because of his imminent experience in this field, and that the composition of the remainder of the working group can be between the CEO, the Mayor and Councillor Alexander. And that's pretty much it. I think we're about to make, we're probably going to be asked questions about short-term repairs to the grandstand. And I think that we can keep making these ad hoc on the run decisions about short-term things, but if we knew what the master plan or the longer term vision or possibilities of this asset of City of Vincent's is, then I guess as a council, we'll be able to make better short-term decisions. So this proposal here, motion, is nothing but dealing with, we need a plan. And if that plan is do nothing, it's do nothing. If it's development, it's development. If it's to try to get grant funding from the AFL and the WAFC, it's why wouldn't we do that if we didn't have to pay for something and we fix our sustainable infrastructure issues? So I just think we need a plan, and this is what the intention of this is. I'm not saying that I want to be part of that discussion as a group. All I'm saying is I think we need a plan, and that's why I'm tabling the motion.
Thanks, councillor Alexander. It was seconded by councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just to check in with councillor Alexander, who's named in part 2B of this recommendation, that should the recommendation be approved, that he's happy to take on the role of chair of the working group. I think if this motion passes, then you're listed as chair.
I would be very happy for you to be chair if you're prepared to take it on. I don't need to be at everything because I am very, very busy. So I'd be really grateful for council members to step up and take on these roles where they're leading particular projects, and I'd strongly encourage council members to do so.
I'm happy to do it, but I also just want to say that I'm not a fan of ratepayers' money necessarily going into to stadiums, and there might be a presumption that because you're interested in football that you just pile money in. As I said, I'm happy to chair it. I'm happy to give some advice or whatever you think's worthwhile.
Thank you, councillor Alexander. Look, I'm very happy to support this motion, and I appreciate councillor Alexander letting us know that he's going to be an independent chair, which I think is fantastic. So absolutely. And yeah, love a plan. Definitely love a plan that actually will offer something up that we can all we can actually achieve. And think we should definitely try and take advantage of the timing, because the city did a great job with the grand final, and we also have some fantastic examples of previous planning activities over recent years that have just been done so well. So I have no doubt that our maturity in this space has grown, and look forward to see what comes out of this group.
Councillors, councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Nicole. First of all, very quickly, I think you do have a conflict that's worth declaring. Second of all, thanks for putting this motion forward. Very much in support of it. I think councillor Alexander has some very unique talents and experience in this field. And, you know, thanks to the work from admin and the consultants to date on this process, but a little bit of a refresh and new approach would certainly be welcome. So yeah, very much in support of this.
Councillors, councillor Warner.
Thank you, councillor Iapolo, for bringing this forward. As someone who was involved with the events industry, I'm really excited as to what this precinct could offer to us. I'm really excited to see what this master plan could actually deliver to us. So thank you for bringing it. Councillor Alexander is he has these unique skills, and I think it would be a terrific thing. I'm keen to know how admin feel about this. Because it's sort of been parked from what I can see for a while. So just keen to know what the admin response is on this.
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, as mentioned, it was parked due to the current work that was done and the inability to fund and deliver on the plan that was done. We were not keen to present to council a plan that was unable to be achieved due to lack of funding. So we are in support of revisiting it and looking at a plan that is able to be achieved with a larger scope that looks at all of the stakeholders in the area. As mentioned in the administration comments, it would be a large project, so we would have a significant FTE associated with this to ensure that we are speaking to all of the relevant stakeholders, and we are able to produce a plan that does consider all of the different options on this site and how it could be sustainably delivered into the future.
Thank you.
I just want to say point of order too, because I don't think that comment from councillor Wallace was appropriate. It's not his decision to make an opinion or a comment about whether he believes that I've made should have made a declaration or not. That is mine and mine alone. If he wishes to make a complaint, you're welcome to do so. But I don't think that was appropriate in chamber. Thank you.
Point noted. Director, do you wish to comment?
I think the comment's been made.
Yep. Okay. Noted. Thank you. Councillors, any further debate on the motion? You don't want to vote on your own motion? No, you've put the motion as the mover, but you're leaving the chamber when I'm about to call the vote. I'm just noting. Right. Okay, perhaps there has been some notice. Okay, so there being no further debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, my apologies. The CEO has pointed out to me that there is actually typo. Point C says that the Leederville Oval Working Group will be determined prior to the 23rd of December 2023. I don't think that was the timeliness that the mover was seeking. I think it is intended to be 2022. Can we change that without the mover of the motion being in the room? Or perhaps we should wait? Have to wait. Well, the mover's not here to accept that change. That will just have to go through as it is. And we can choose the group by next December.
Through the chair, it is simply a typo. I'm sure we can, it shouldn't be an issue. It's acknowledged as a typo.
It's a
recognised as
typo,
a typo.
okay. We've had a lot of typos in our amendments this evening.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, it's just a typo on the
Yeah,
end.
okay. All right, we'll accept that as a typo and we'll move it as C saying 23rd of December 2022. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Oh, sorry, those against. Councillor Castle voting against. I declare that carried. Can I just ask, because we have now got a very tight time frame on who's going to be part of this working group, is there any expressions of interest? Councillor Warner, thank you. Councillor Wallace, thank you very much. That's great. Thank you, appreciate that. That makes it much easier to meet that deadline. Thank you. Okay, we have one final item for this evening. It is a confidential item. So we will have to move behind closed doors for that item to deal with 17.1 employment contract renewal CEO. Can I have a mover and seconder to move behind closed doors? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried.